Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today I'm joined by my lovely creative partner.
Monty, I'm back. I know I missed out on Yara. Whatever. I had stuff to do that week. I definitely feel sad that I couldn't get to join Ian, but I'm here now for something else that I'm actually really excited to talk about.
So we'll be talking about the comic book by RazörFist with art by George Alexopoulos, Ghost of the Badlands, and it's sold as a Western. We're here to tell you how it's not a Western.
No, it's not. I don't mean to mean, but like it's not really.
We'll get into that, though.
We'll
get into it. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, if you enjoy having Monty here, hit like, subscribe, share for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemwy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt. You write a short story using that prompt. And on the first Monday of the month, we bask in your creativity, which you guys always bring. It's a good time. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, and that includes a comic book. You submit the first chapter and the cover page to the channel. It'll be read here to hopefully help more readers find your work. Just spreading as much as we can on Mondays to as much of the creative independent community as possible. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. And my newest novel, Bodymore Zero, is coming out in October, featuring these fine gentlemen right here, who were drawn by this beautiful artist over here.
Oh, thanks. I'm drawing them. That's when I was like elevating, because I'm looking at them right now. It's like with the Casey picture, because like I'll get to a point where I'm like, oh, I really like this, and then I draw something else. I'm like, I like this better. Like I'm improving, and like now I want to go and redraw this again, and it's a whole thing. But I'm really really proud of those two pictures. I think they're great. They're the start of something that I really appreciate, like a collection almost of characters that are like that. If you join us on Fridays for the loin stream, we just finished fourth lane. We dragged ourselves across that finish line. Okay.
Yes, we did.
Oh my God. I am like physically hurting right now. Can this please hurry up and end this? But you'll see other characters that I did that are part of our projects together. So, I've done all those little illustrations if anybody wanted to know. If anybody wants to hire me, my information will be plugged down in the comments in the description section. So I usually just go by email, or if you're on our Discord server, you can find me there. So I'm very loved working on those pictures, and I've loved Bodymore Zero because I've read it now and I'm rambling. So I'm just excited. It's been a while.
With that said, we're going to get into this, and as luck would have it, we're going to have the illustrations here. So anybody who hasn't seen the art can look at it, which is going to be one of my opening comments, as I love George's work. This is the whole reason why we're here. Because I supported George's Mary Sue comic back in like 2018. Yeah. And then we read it together here. If you haven't checked out that video, go and check it out, because you can't get his comics. Otherwise, I'd say go buy those comics.
Yes.
But it was such a fun story. The art is so beautiful. And honestly, I think George is one of the most underrated comic book artists of our generation.
I think he is too. I think he's got a wonderful style. It's extremely expressive. It's beautifully colored, and all the little, like, there's something really fluid about George's work that I love. It reminds me of water, always reminds me of water. And I appreciate that there's not this stiff quality to it that I've seen in a lot of the more what we would refer to as like the traditional, superhero style comic, which, if you know a little bit of history of comics, however many years ago, it's almost been 100 years at this point, comics weren't really associated with superheroes. Comics at a certain point were more so associated with just a certain art style. But I feel like a lot of times the gatekeepers of comics want it to look a certain way, and I don't think George fits their criteria, so to speak. And I think that he has a wonderful way of expressing himself through his work with his color. And I was excited because I would not really pick up a RazörFist book. I don't really care for what RazörFist does in terms of his writing. But since George was the illustrator and the person who did the comic, I was like, let's do it. I'll do it for George.
Yep,
I'll do it for George.
I don't know anything about any of RazörFist's books. I've never
Mhm.
read any of their books. I don't know anything even about what the synopses are of those books. But I had been following George on social media at the time that Ghost in the Badlands was still being written.
Mhm.
And we had talked about Mary Sue, and I was like, I will pretty much follow George anywhere just because I love the expression work and George's
Mhm.
scenes.
Are
Like,
great.
are fantastic. And you
They're
can see,
wonderful.
especially in Mary Sue, because George controlled all of Mary Sue.
Yeah.
George was the writer and the artist. And
Yeah.
there were moments, plenty of moments that were just full page illustrations of scene setting or quiet moments with no dialogue. And it tells me that the artist has a love for the visuals that can tell the story through the visuals alone. And Mary Sue
Yes.
is all in color, and so it's so vibrant. But even switching from that to the black and white that is Ghost of the Badlands, you
Still
also have
powerful.
and you still have a very different style. So like
Mhm.
the artist chose to do the other style for Mary Sue, and then this went with this style, which is very different but still very George.
Yeah,
for
it's
Ghost
still
of the
very George.
Badlands.
Goes to the Badlands, the line work is a lot more erratic. It's not as soft or fluid like it is in, Mary Sue, which I think has a lot to do with the protagonists, for one thing, and also the genres.
I absolutely think it has to do with the
Yeah,
genres because
genres.
the Mary Sue is more whimsical and it's the sci-fi, and this is
Sci-fi
more hardline.
hardline. It's still George though. That's what I appreciate a lot about that. George seems to have this has like an understanding that like or appreciation of telling a story without words because I think he's learned a lot from manga and anime, which are really great places to learn storytelling from in certain areas. In terms of the Japanese, in particular, appreciate pictures more than we do over here in the West. And how you can tell a story with no words via the picture. And one of the other people that I know that can do this is Tsutomu Nihei, who is the mangaka for Blom, Biomega, Knights of Sardonia. Like that man knows how to tell a story without saying anything. And I think that George perfectly emulates that and goes to the Badlands because when there's no dialogue and you're just left in the environment to be immerse yourself in this beautiful environment that he has created, you feel it. I feel it. I feel like there's so much magic in that. Which it's just a shame that the writing for this is just as bad as it is.
I also think that it shows through in the expression work that is very specific. It's also
Yes.
very exaggerated. Is I feel like one of George's signatures because you get that
Yes.
in Mary Sue as well.
I love the exaggerated
for me, it feels George's work feels like it admires humanity for what it can be.
Yes, I agree.
Because there's an appreciation where there's not, you can see in some art where there's just not an appreciation for the subject of the art. And I don't feel that with George's work. The other thing that I was going to say is, you could take out the words, you could take out the dialogue, and you could still follow the story because the images are so expressive.
Yes, you're right. Absolutely. Someone, when we get into it, like this book would have been, I feel like, without the dialogue, George just expertly pushes this story through in fluidity. With the dialogue, to me, clunks it up. Like you just take that back, remove the dialogue, and it's just a wordless story. You would know exactly what was going on because that's just how strong his artwork is. Like his storytelling through pictures does not need the dialogue in this.
Mm-hmm. I feel like going into this, I already got to say that there were ideas here, and it's not as bad as the Rippaverse comics.
No,
but it feels like an underdeveloped story.
It's very underdeveloped. In fact, like the way it's put together, with the story itself told through the dialogue, for one thing, it's extremely ham-fisted in its Christian overtones. And I'm saying this as a Christian, this is very ham-fisted. This is like, I'm going to thump you over the head with a Bible as hard as I can type of stuff. And it's really goofy. It is very hard to make something like that work in my experience. And I've read a lot regardless. And I've read a lot of Christian fiction where it does this, and I've read a lot of Christian fiction where it doesn't do this. Frank Peretti is an example that I can think of where he does not berate you over the head with scripture, but with this, we're being berated over the head with it.
And from that note, I'm going to tell you guys right now, this guy number one is Phantom of the Opera inspired. It feels like 100%. But you'll also find me referring to him as Bible Man throughout, because that's basically what he is. So if you hear me saying Bible Man in the synopsis as we go, this is who I mean, and you'll understand why as we go.
Oh my God, it's High Plains Drifter meets the fucking opera. That's exactly the perfect way to describe that. Phantom of the Opera meets the High Plains Drifter. If you've never seen High Plains Drifter, we'll have to watch this and I'll show it to you. You'll see what I mean.
The last thing that I'm going to say on this before we get started is that I appreciate that this book is available at major retailers, including Amazon, so that other readers can find it outside of the campaign. Because in my opinion, that shows a desire for the creators to be discovered, as opposed to creators who keep their stuff limited to only the campaigns at a certain time that then gets given to their fans or their anti-fans.
Yeah.
What happens when you put something on Amazon is now it's available to be discovered by people who have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
And so the fact that these two put the book on Amazon after the campaign shows to me that they care about their content actually being seen by not just political fans, but by readers. Yeah.
That's pretty much one of the only things I know about RazörFist is that he's a political commentator. But that's pretty much all I know. He's got like long hair and sunglasses, and that's it for RazörFist. But no, I'm excited to talk about this.
So the book opens with a quote page for D.S. Warner saying, Bible proof of the second work of grace, 1880. And that reads, ye blessed are ye. Ye blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Thy have made no compromise with inbred Canaanites, but wish extermination of every evil. Hence, they are willing to receive the most humiliating and sin-killing truth. They not only suffer the loss of right eye and right hand, but for Christ's sake freely bring the old man to the cross, that the whole body of sin might be destroyed. Then we open with a dude laying on the ground, surrounded by 4 bad hombres, guns out, and the narrative says the first time he saw him, he was dying. A point of confusion comes for me here because there's a bubble that says, folks been talking about a black figure dealing with some sort of metal iron since it first started roaming these parts.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the dialogue here. Mechanical iron. I'm like, I sat here and thought for a second. I'm like, do they not realize, is this before there were guns? Like, are we in like 16, or how far back in time are we? But then it turns out that the gun just does not stop shooting bullets. And the first sign of that this is not necessarily a Western.
So the first, and they all have guns. So this isn't like they don't know what a gun is. Some other reference here would have been some kind of iron gun that magically never runs out of bullets, or they never seen this guy reload, but they should have recognized that it wasn't just some sort of mechanical iron. And saying some sort of mechanical iron makes it seem like they have no idea what he has.
Yeah.
But for me, that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense either. And then we get to see, Phantom of the High Plains appear with his gun.
So the ghost shoots these men. They all try to run and they collapse. The number of dudes seems to multiply for a longer gun battle because, we got these guys. We got 4 of them right here. We started out with like 4 right here, which sure, maybe there's some off camera. Then the 4 or 5 of them here because there's 4 standing, 1 on the ground. Then some of them made it to rocks somewhere else. Maybe it was just these guys that were running, got shot in multiple places and still made it to the other side of the rock. But this old man and that guy, that old man, none of them are bleeding.
No, I mean, like, it's none of them are really bleeding, but I feel like it's not so bad. I loved all the facial expressions in this.
They're
I
very
got a
sad.
big kick out of it. They're great.
So
That's great.
this is very George.
It's very George. I love the line work. The hatching too is just wonderful. Like this guy, it looks like he's got like. I know that this is like shading, but also you could confuse it with like someone who suffers from that like fucking werewolf disease, you know, where they grow hair all over their faces. But yeah, like one thing I noticed, like, is just not told through the perspective of the Phantom, but rather it's told from the perspective of somebody who survived an attack from the Phantom, and the reason behind that is actually kind of it falls apart on its. This falls apart completely once you like get further into the story. Where I'm like, this does not make sense at all. Why he was chosen because he spared somebody apparently. But the opening dialogue is basically the first time I saw the ghost, I was dying, which is not a bad, way to open up your story, but it just kind of screams to me amateurish because it's like, it reminds me of all those videos on like YouTube that I did when we were all younger. Like, maybe not for you, but I can speak for those of us who were trying to figure out what to do with whenever we were like starting out writing. We'd go and, consult Dr. Google about what we should do. And every place ever, every person ever, every agent, editor, name it, would say, you got to have a hook because that's what's going to keep people invested. And this is what this reminds me of, is somebody like, this is a hook. I'm dying and a ghost. I saw this ghost and I'm dying. And I thought, oh, I kind of just associate it with, instead of the ghost as like a title, like I thought of it as a fucking noun, as a ghost, right? Like, of course you'd see a ghost if you're dying. You're dying. You are a ghost. You're just about. And I was like, oh, wait, it's the ghost, not a ghost.
I don't
Excuse me.
think that I would have minded that as the opening, since this is going to theoretically, one of the plots here is Paul's redemption. But I think if it didn't have the ghost being such an active participant in the plot, because if you're on the cusp of life and death, then you usually see God or an angel. Like that's where this wants to go. And that's what that reference looks like to me as he's going, the first time I saw this. And since it also bookends with this having basically a reference to the ghost being God or a sort of God stand-in, then I could have been fine with the first time I saw him, I was dying, because that would have made sense. But then probably dragging him out of here and then him waking up where the ghost isn't there. Like these scenes with this gunfight, while the gunfight is cool, I think that it cheapens the ghost's persona. And what would have been better would have been for him to be seeing, the remnants, maybe have some black flashing, like he's blinking, trying to stay awake because he's passing out. And you go from the little girl being there or from the ghost being up in his face to see if he's still alive. Right. We don't even need to see what happened to the other people. We can just assume either they were killed or they ran off, because this is about the ghost having a moment with this guy. Or it could have just been like, even if we don't see the things on the side, it could have just been the ghost had picked up this guy and ran away, and now they were somewhere safe, and so the ghost was checking on him. So like give them a moment to have this figurative dream-like thing, so that, like you said in our conversation before, he could be like, was that real? Was that not real? Because when he comes to, he's going to be in a room with this little girl.
With the thing with the Old West, and you're wanting to build up a legend, right? You're wanting to build up a figure of the Old West. Like, this guy is a long shadow, right? This guy is something that you're terrified of, but nobody knows if he's real or not, because either whoever saw this person is like insane because they saw this thing, or they don't live to tell the tale. He's just like a figment boogeyman figure that's out for righteousness, right? Play up the idea of this legend if you're going to do that, especially with somebody whose gun doesn't run out of bullets. And I can only surmise that this is a mythical, magical figure of some sort, that has, for whatever reason, chosen the Badlands in Arizona to prowl around, right, to stop the wickedness of men. I would have had it, because it turns out he gets chosen, right? He's selected by the ghost because he hesitated in killing that little girl right there. And so he hesitates because he's not going to kill this little girl. What I would have done is I would have shown it as him, this group of people attacking this wagon, right?
Mhm.
And then they get to the point where this little girl is sitting there by her dying parents. She looks terrified. He sees her, and for whatever reason, his heart just starts to beat for a second, and he cannot kill her. And so the people that he's with turn on him because he's starting to prove that he's some sort of a liability. He could turn on them. If he can't kill this little girl, how's he going to be able to continue on with us? So they shoot him or whatever, right? And then after that's over, he blacks out because this guy gets just freaking hit with a bunch of bullets, right? Like we see later on, he got bushwhacked, like he was ambushed by his people, right? They shot him up pretty bad. I would have had him not see any of this at all, right? I'd have him like pass out because he's in pain, wakes up, and all the people that he was with are dead now. He doesn't know who did it or how it happened, but he's still alive. And then he sees this note from the ghost or something like that. And it says, if you want to know what happened here, I want you to take this little girl someplace else. And then you will find out what happened. And he just goes on this journey trying to figure out what happened. So I had it a lot better framed in my head, but like, whatever. You know, it just was bizarre. You know, like it's we're seeing this moment. Go on.
I think that would have been a better way to start this too, is if you can even still have the idea of the first page saying the first time I saw him, I was dying. And that could be a splash page, but then the very beginning of the scene is them getting ready to ambush this caravan, and then you see them ambush the caravan, and then they take down. They get taken down. Like instead of having it show it later and then a flashback to this, have this start out with that action scene that then gets interrupted because he's going to get executed here. And then it catches up. He's passing out, and then it catches up to him seeing the ghost faces in that first splash page.
Yes, and he doesn't know if it's real or not, right? He possibly could think he's hallucinating because he is losing blood, and he's like, well, maybe I am dying. Maybe this is what they talk about when they see the ghost, because he's come to collect my soul because I'm dying.
Yep.
So that
would then start, and something like that would then start giving hints to whatever the legend is in this area, because the title does give an idea, and then when you get to the bartender later, or the owner of the bar,
the proprietor,
about, hey, there is a legend of this guy and people call him different names. So this guy in this area should have some inkling of the legend of the ghost of this land.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah. Like,
and if you see him, you're probably going to die.
Yeah. But it's on death's door, right? Because, you know, every man at his death, you know, feels the need to confess. And who do people typically confess to whenever they're dying? To God, right? You know, your soul. And so you could have a correlation between the spiritual aspect of this being that is supposedly roaming the lands, right?
So there's this gunfight between a lot of them, and there's then a scene skip where we kind of get, because we kind of got ahead of ourselves a little bit, but you got all of them like shooting here, and the ghost is running off, and then you just got two of them standing there. Where did the other guys go?
Yeah, I don't.
How did they all die? Where did these guys come into the center? So that was kind of awkward.
I mean, and so did he chase them through, like, because we don't really know. This happens towards the end as well, you know, at the comic. But I don't really see how this happened. Like the transitional periods are weird because it looks like they're in a prairie, and then all of a sudden it's a desert, and then there's rocks, and there's no rocks, and it's like, well, did the ghost chase all these people from different areas across the Badlands or whatnot? Because I don't know. It just felt like things were bizarre, or I don't know if it's some sort of like interpretation that Redstone is having right here, where it's like he doesn't. I mean, I don't know, but it just felt strangely paced in this moment, where it's like there's canyon here. Clearly, they're in Arizona. Obviously, it's probably a desert, right? Because it's in Arizona, you know, and you know, but it's just the background switched up weirdly, and I don't know what the creative decision was behind that. It did not look that great to me in terms of pacing.
So then Ghost shows up again after everybody is dead, obviously, and he's going to take the little girl because he's going to rescue her. And he delivers some more biblical language, which pretty much every time he talks, he's delivering biblical language quotes or biblical style quotes. And the dude's laying on the ground is left alive and sees the crying little girl with her dead parents laying at her sides. Then he passes out. As the ghost takes the little girl, he says, "Suffer the little children and forbid them to come unto me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven."
This is going to sound so bad. All right. Whenever he said like suffer the little children, I just think of the John Saul book, Suffer the Children, which is about a terrible, awful things happen to kids in that book. And that's the first thing I think of. I don't think of the Bible verse. I just think of that John Saul novel. That was so random and nitpicky, but like it whatever. But anyway.
Then the guy that was dying on the ground wakes up in this room. His arm is missing. And he says, "Suppose I deserve the joke," when he sees that he's got a little wrapped stub. Then he grabs his gun from the side table and considers that he's going to shoot himself. But then he sees a letter. So he decides, maybe I'll see what that says instead of killing myself this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And the letter tells him that he's lived a life as a bandit, as a bad person, and he can continue going on living that way. But if he wants, he can have a chance at a second life by listening to what the person who wrote this letter said, and to find out what he needs to do to live that second life, the better life. He needs to go south to the town of Two Guns.
Yeah, Two Guns. It was it just basically expositional moments of him, what he did and that he was a bad guy, and that, also another thing too, I don't notice the fucking like reference to the Bible quote, if your right hand causes you to sin, you better just cut it off. I grew up in the fucking Bible Belt. Like, I know what that means. Very on the nose stuff here. This is something that bothers me. He lost his fucking right arm. Like, and I'm like, okay, like it's a metaphor. It's both literal and metaphorical, right? Bible is made up of both metaphorical and literative, context. And everyone's like, if your eye or hand or some body part on you causes you to sin, then you just sever it. And that can be interpreted as literal or figuratively. And I prefer to think of it as figurative, where it's like, if you do this thing, then get away from that thing and find something else that you're not going to, whatever. But it's like this is something that always bothers me. And this is what, in terms of like the church always does this. I'm not saying that RazörFist is the church, but the heavy-handed scripture, it really is something that irks me, because it's not as profound as you think it is, because in the way you're using it, it's actually really blasphemous. That's what I think, because this is a person who is justifying their brutality by using God to do so. You think you're slaying the wicked, but you're using somebody to do that, by the way. You're tricking people into it. And there's a Bible verse that I think of, which is, in Matthew, which Matthew always has some great verses. And that is, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. That's Matthew 6-1. And you can go through all of that. But if you do things in silence, you pray in silence, because this is somebody who wants to be seen, right? I want everyone to fear me because God, look at how righteous I am. Look at me and my Bible knowledge. And I'm going to speak to you in heavy-handed, ham-fisted Bible verses. This is something that's always bothered me. And the church always does this. This is what takes it from being art to propaganda. That is why I cannot stomach half of this. It's like, you can do this stuff, but for the love of God, have some class when you're doing it, because it's undignified and it's blasphemous. That's what I think it does. Like, it just bothers me.
That's kind of what makes Ghost's character also kind of confusing. Like, if he was more hands off and he was like, okay, I'm giving you a second chance, but then he needed to show more care for the surroundings, because Ghost seems to know everything that is going on in this little area, which totally fine. He can be this overseer, has, you know, fingers in all these networks of whispering to know who's corrupt and what's corrupt.
Right.
But the fact that he lets an entire family get slaughtered when he knows that it's going to happen in order to give this guy a chance at redemption while also quoting the Bible just makes the ghost look wicked, in which case I'm not sure if he's supposed to look like a wicked outlaw that is justifying himself with Bible verse, which is fine. You can do that. Or you've got this guy who is supposed to be a stand-in for the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, which is probably where Ghost in the Badlands come from. It's the Holy Ghost.
Holy Ghost.
And so I just thought of that. But
yeah, me too. Like, no, I got you, the Holy Ghost, right? You know, the Father,
like,
Son, Holy Ghost.
If that's where you were going to go, then he needed to not be as hands-on with murdering people the way that he does, acting like he is righteous while using the Bible to justify his murders.
And I don't like that at all. For one thing, I'll tell you this right now, the hand of God, you know, the moral arbiter of this universe, the creator, right? I think of the hand of God as being a gentle subtlety while also having a mean southpaw, because he can come in and whack you upside the head if you're not doing what you need to do. And the thing is, it's so much more subtle than just on the nose, right? When people say that I had an experience with God, right? And this is something that we've all probably experienced. I grew up in, you know, the Pentecostals area, and remember, if anybody knows what a Pentecostal is, and you know what I'm talking about, you know, all right, where it's like people have these divine, phantasmagorical, like almost, you know, divine rapture experiences that are physically breathtaking, like a beautiful light descended from the heavens. And I'm not saying that that's impossible, but I'm saying most people do not have that spiritual experience. They don't. And so to me, it comes across as being, you know, portraying God as something that he's not. And while God is and can be wrathful, this is not an example of righteous wrath. Okay. This is just poorly put together and trying to be smarter than it actually is, and doesn't typically understand the Bible for the certain qualities in which that it presents itself to us as. And I think it's a bastardization of the scriptures, and I don't appreciate it. I just don't. I really don't like it when the church does things like that. When any church does something like this, it is blasphemous. But anyway.
I do want to take the moment to appreciate this page, because this little girl is adorable.
Oh, she's adorable.
I love the expression.
The hair.
And I think the posing and the gun. I think the detailing on this page. I mean, George's detailing is fantastic. But I'm taking a moment to appreciate this page. Anyway, so he refuses. This is the flashback, because he's being told he's given another chance, because while he's done terrible things when he was put to kill this innocent life, he didn't kill her, and instead, you know, let his team shoot him. And this was also a moment where this is nicely staged, but he takes so many shots where you would be like, okay, how is he not dead? They shot him. They did an execution style with multiple guns at this guy.
Yeah, this guy should not be in any, unless the ghost has magical healing abilities, but we don't ever see. But like,
I guess we can infer that.
We can infer that this dude, they pumped him, they filled him so full of holes that he should be whistling every time the wind blows. Okay, like there's just no way. But instead, he just loses his right arm, you know, because cut off thy right arm if it causes you to sin.
I think it would have been better to have this moment slowed down so that they could, the captain of the group could specifically shoot him in a very specific way. Maybe it's over here near his shoulder or in his chest, and they kick him or something, you know, do a couple, like actually torture him as punishment. But they don't plan to kill him because they want him to die of dehydration or animals tearing him apart in the Arizona.
You know, like,
so like then that would
the leg or.
But what they do here, the way that they shoot him, is they wanted an execution.
And we don't even know anything about this character before this moment either, to know, like, why would they shoot him that much? Is he just somebody that he's been shot a bunch of times before, you know, that he's just very hard to kill, or like, or
I think it's just drama.
Kill him. It's just drama.
This, because this looks like this is very dramatic. I think it's just dramatic art.
And
it's not for a reason.
I love the drama. Like I love some tea. Okay. I love the drama. I love dramatic. Like this right here is just gorgeous. Like the bottom half, like it's just incredible. George,
I
you're
could only
incredible.
imagine what George would have done if they were allowed to do this in color
Oh my
because of
goodness.
how Mary Sue looks.
Mary Sue's beautiful. Like his the way with color, he just knows what he's doing. He's a professional. But this does also suit the genre
This
itself. Like I'd
absolutely suits it.
love to see it in color though. Like I hope if they do get any further with this, I hope there's a special edition color because I'll totally buy it, regardless of how I feel about it. I'll totally buy it because I'm all for buying good art. But I do feel like there's just it's just for the sake of the drama, and I love dramatic shots, but like it would be so much more powerful if there was any meaning in it, and it does not feel like there's any. It's like superficial meaning, right? It doesn't have any depth to it outside of slapping us in the face with like ridiculously spoken scripture. Like that's what it just does. Like anyway.
And then also, and we'll find you brought this up because you recognized it sooner or saw it soon. I mean, you probably would have been the one to recognize it anyway. No, the fact that it is sort of a retelling or a reimagining of the story of Paul.
Saul, yeah, that's what I think too.
Well, that's what I said. Is you were the one that brought
right.
that up and mentioned it. Because this character's name is actually Paul, and what happened with Paul is Paul was given a chance to not be a jerk, to not be a criminal anymore. to put it lightly. He was given a chance at redemption by Jesus. And when he proved himself to be willing to seek redemption, he was given a new name.
The name Paul.
Yep.
Yeah. And we don't know his name until the very end of the story. So spoilers alert. We call him Redstone. I keep calling him Redfern, whatever. I just interchangeable last name to me. It doesn't have any weight or meaning. I'm somebody that's just not a big fan of that. It's a nitpick of mine. I feel like a moniker in the Old West is such a huge thing. It's a big trope within Western culture is to have a badass moniker. You got like what, Wild Bill Hickok, Buffalo Bill, Billy the Kid, Jesse James. Sometimes a name is a name. Jesse James is a name. Everyone knows that name, Jesse James. He is a figure in American lore, right? Jesse James, all these old gold, gunslingers, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Butch Cassidy, all these other, like a name is really important when it comes to the Old West. And if you making a story, a lot of times you want to get a good name in there. Like, and I can even think of fictional names right now, like Woodrow Call, Augustus McCrae, Aloysius Teaspoon Hunter. You got the kid that's just a kid.
The most important of them all, Cobalt Cassidy.
Colboat Cat, can't fucking say it right now. I can't talk. Like, listen, I love Westerns. I do. I've grown up with Westerns. I am from Texas, okay? Like, I grew up watching Westerns. John Wayne, I can tell you right now, one of the things in my household, when you come into my household, there's 3 things you cannot do. You can't talk about, you cannot talk bad about Elvis Presley. You can't talk bad about George W. Bush, and you can't talk bad about John Wayne. If you do, you can hit the door. Okay, that is how I grew up, right? And I love the Old West because to me that is our American lore, that is our culture. I love it so much. People love to defer to like Eastern cultures or English cultures such as what Tolkien did, but the West is truly unique. The Old West is like our fantasy in a sense, not the actual genre, but it's our lore.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the Dark Tower series so much. It's because that is an American fantasy. That is pure American fantasy. That at its core is a Western. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. Like that is a moment of Americanism right there. And I'm going and gushing and stuff like that, but I love it. But this right here is so shallow. It's so empty to me when I read it. I'm like, this is like a caricature of a Western. It's not doing anything new. Even if it has like Phantom of the High Plains Drifter in here, shooting people up with a gun that don't run out of bullets. It's not really that interesting beyond that because it doesn't rely on the idea of stigmatizing him at all in any regard. Sure, he's stigmatized, but he's also literal too because he appears, and other people seem to know about him too because they have the Byzantine cross, which is known as the Patriarchal Cross or the Lorraine Cross, which I did not know about that.
And that'll be his symbol. And
Mhm.
speaking of like other people see him and all of that, that's one of the things that also confuses this story in general is like, is this a story about the ghost of the Badlands and he is the focus, or is this the story of Paul and Paul being given a second chance? And through that second chance, he sees and meets other people that were given a second chance by the ghost, because we're going to see that this symbol of the cross is given to other people who have connections to the ghost. And if you left the ghost as this figment that maybe you only see in this desperate situation, when you when you're given a chance at redemption, then you keep it as this mystical thing that is not an active member. And that actually would have made Paul's choices stronger. But instead, because the ghost is an active member of the story, Paul just looks like a puppet doing what his boss
does. Servant. I mean, even towards the end, we'll get there when we get there, but it's like there's another Bible verse. So it's like, I don't know what this is inferring, because at some point I'm like, this is just another fucking superhero comic with a Western face.
It really is. When we said Bible man jokingly, we didn't realize how accurate we were.
No, not at all. Like, it's very accurate. I'm like, this is a superhero story. Like, this is superhero crap. Again, I'm so done with superheroes. I wish George had written this. I do, because George actually knows how to write.
George knows how to write a story.
Yes. And he knows how to pace it really well. But this is just goofy.
Anyway, so he finishes reading his letter and gets the orders to head south to Two Gun if he wants to have his second chance. And then he carries this necklace as evidence of his loyalty. And then we switch over here to Fat Daddy Lucifer Blackheart is what we've decided to call him.
Daddy Lucifer Blackheart from fucking Louisiana, because the way it's written, it's like, how did this fat daddy, fat cat, who clearly came from, he's even dressed up like somebody who came from like a freaking casino boat in the bayou. Like, that's what he looks like. So I was like, the same to you, Shell. Like, I do say that I must infer all this. He has a non-rhotic country ass accent. He's, got himself a bodyguard right there. He's smoking a stogie, and he's the Penguin, but in the Old West. And we don't even really understand what he is meant to be doing here until way later on, because the foreshadowing is so bad in this. And it's all just cut out, just like, let me show you the villain of this story, who's clearly a villain. He's got a stogie, and he clearly has a non-rhotic. That's him.
Oops, where did that go? Is this the same guy that is at the end of the story that he goes back for? But it just says that the dude relocated. So this is talking about Redstone relocating, right?
Yeah. So we don't even know why he ended up there, other than.
Now I'm really confused, because so you got this random guy right here, wherever this is, not anywhere near whatever thing Redstone was staying in.
No.
And so he's supposed to go south to Two Gun. And then he ends up in Devil's Canyon Diablo. Is this Canyon Diablo? Does he go back to Canyon Diablo after going to Two Gun?
I guess so. He does. I guess, is he supposed to go to Two Gun to intercept Blackfeather? Because that's what I can only surmise. But like, I don't understand this need to do this, because Blackfeather is so. Oh, we'll get there when we get there. But like, it's just, was he staying in there in that saloon? Where did he go? Was he already in Canyon Diablo, which is like Canyon Devil? I mean,
he's not.
Wow.
Yeah, we have no idea where this is. But then
there's that bastard. No, excuse me.
But then this guy is the guy that's at the end, that is in the telegram shop that's in Canyon Diablo. So then our only guess must be that this is Canyon Diablo. And he gets sent out of Canyon Diablo to go to Two Guns to then get Blackfeather, who is on his way to Canyon Diablo. And he could have just stayed in Canyon Diablo, because Blackfeather would have ended up in Canyon.
Oh, the ghost. Did we just need a really cool scene where the ghost, doesn't actually even fucking need red bone?
I guess red feather. I guess possibly. And then maybe it could have shown us the actual letter that says, hey, bring Blackfeather to Canyon Diablo, because he's not here and we don't know when he's going to be here. And Bible Man has the authority over Canyon Diablo. And so then It was,
Yeah,
but then there's no point in going to go after the coach if it was meant to bring him to Canon Diablo.
Yeah.
Because the only reason then that they get to Canon Diablo is because the marshal shows up and then takes them to Canon Diablo.
Yeah, like it was pointless them doing that because it's like, well, because it turns out that Blackfeather is in cahoots with Big Black Daddy Lucifer. I don't know whatever. But like to try and steal this person's land, because back then, this was before Arizona was officially inducted into the US government. It was Arizona territory, so it was pretty much, no man's land at that point. And the railroad was going through it. And so like if you had property, basically when the railroad cut through somebody's property, the railroad companies would pay that property owner big money, because the railroad at that point was going to be big money. So if anybody decided to allow that to happen, they would be paid in kind later on. And so essentially the plot, what we basically doesn't say this, right? This is what I can infer because I know a little bit about this time period. I don't know everything. I'm no real big historian, but I do know a little bit. So if like a railroad company went through property, they would have to buy, like, do something with the land. And so that being said, like it looks like this guy, Big Daddy Lucifer Blackheart, wants the land. But for some reason, since he's the mayor, and it's no man's land, we'll get there. It's just a stupid plot that was never even introduced to begin with, the start of this. So it felt very random when it finally did come to fruition.
Yeah.
Weird.
So one of the things that also would have helped, when we already have the Bible man is going to be kind of obtuse about what he wants. He's like, go here and then you can get it. Which, whatever. So he goes and talks to this bartender right here. And the bartender says that he's both the owner and the proprietor, which
it's the same fucking thing. And he
also says, my name is Bartholomew. I'm Bart. It's that there was some editing that could have been done to make this a little less.
Yeah, like it's like, oh, look at me. I'm a Western. I use really big words that nobody says anymore. Even though every Western I've ever read and watched have never said proprietor. This just looks like somebody went to the thesaurus and did not want to use something that everyone could recognize, because he wants people to think that he's smarter than he actually is. And so let me just use big words that really nobody uses anymore. Nobody used even that much back then. And he goes, are you the proprietor of this place? And the dude's like, no, I just like wearing an apron, which is basically saying, yes, I'm the owner. And then whenever he I guess likes Redstone. And
no, so Redstone is
proprietor and owner of this place.
Redstone is leaving because he's like, no, I'm not going to help you, get the frick out of here, basically. Like he said, I came to pick up a telegram, and the dude's like, well, who freaking cares? I'm not the post. And so then he's leaving, but he's got his like rosary cross on his hand, which means this guy who is part of that also shows he is part of Bible Man's clan. And so he's like, okay, I was waiting for you. Okay, I know what you're talking about. I got the letter. Here's the letter. So that's why he gave him the letter, because he recognized, oh, you have the cross. I have the cross, which means that you're the one that gave the letter.
Basically saying that the word proprietor got repeated twice, right? Because it was only Redstone asked if he was the proprietor, and then later on, the Bartholomew goes, I'm proprietor and owner. I'm like, that's the same fucking thing. Why did you need to say this? Like, oh, look, I'm using this word. That's the only thing I was inferring about, was like that. This is like lame to me. Like, yes, you found a big word. Good for you. Like,
so the letter warns that even if you make fake alliances, he's like, okay, so go and infiltrate these guys, these bad lads over there. And even if you infiltrate them and you become friends with them, don't trust them, because even if your alliance with them is fake, well, theirs is double fake.
So what's the point? Like, why does he even need to infiltrate anyways? Why not? I don't get it.
When we should have more been given a reason for the infiltration. If it's like, hey, go and befriend those guys and then get them to go to Canyon Diablo, which, again, why would you need to force them to Canyon Diablo if Blackfeather is actually friends with the mayor anyway? He's going to show up again.
Yeah. Unless the mayor hired him to do it when he got there, then that would make the guy make the fucking Bible man look more smarmy than he actually is, which is like, oh, so you set these people up to be slaughtered so you could stop Big Daddy Blackheart, Lucifer man, from taking the railroad money that belongs to that family, when it's like, why didn't you just situate Redstone with that family to begin with and have him come to care about them instead of infiltrating this stupid thing that we don't even see how he infiltrates, except I've got gold and gold buys friends. Here, go off and infiltrate.
Pretty much that. So they sit here saying how cool the ghost of the Badlands is and how he's got so many names because everybody talks about him. So you'd think that there'd be a little bit more vibe of legend going around, whatever. But the leader of the group over here is Blackfeather, who's the one that they actually have to make a friendship with. And the way that he's going to make friendship, he's also just, here's your monies that you're going to go buy his friendship with. So then we just skip to them going out into the woods because he buys his way in there. But the way he buys his way in there is just with tequila and a couple of bullets. And it's not enough for Blackfeather to even respect him or trust him, period. Because he's like, hey, don't question me about what we're freaking doing it here. You're here because I let you be here.
Missing a right arm, wouldn't that make him a liability to begin with? It makes no sense for him to infiltrate. For one, we don't even see how he does it outside if he just gave him a bag of gold and, like you said, some tequila and bullets. Like, was he going to use him for cannon fodder? Like, oh, I guess I could possibly use you for a meat shield in case something went wrong. Like, it's just bizarrely handled, especially whenever it's like when we get to this scene, because Bible Man returns, how convenient, it's a setup. Like, there's no point to this. It's just a setup to say, oh, Bible Man is cool. Look how cool he is. That's what it feels like,
Because Bible Man if Bible Man knew where these guys were, he could have ambushed them on his own. What the frick did this guy do? This guy didn't give them the tip. Because later when they escape this and you've got Blackfeather and Redstone and they're running away, he says, oh, I knew that tip was bunk. Well, if the tip had come from Redstone, then he wouldn't be trusting Redstone, which means the tip didn't come from Redstone, which means what part in this did Redstone even play? He didn't do anything. He didn't lead them here. He didn't.
Which is also really kind of like, again, something I don't envision God would do, because also it shows like a weird thing too, where like he spares this other family because he basically sets up a bait and switch.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nobody in this stagecoach, but he's the one driving the stagecoach through the rain because he apparently, I guess, halted the other people on the side of the I'm sorry I got to this part, and I just like both you and I had the same thought about Veggie Tales because there was
got Mr. Lunt over here.
Mr. Lunt.
But also what I dislike about the setup of this is that we miss a very necessary characterization moment to actually see Redstone sit down with Blackfeather and show us how they communicate, show us what Redstone did to get Blackfeather's trust, because they're all bandits. They all don't trust each other. And then this guy is a drifter that just flew in out of town, got money from the bartender, and then makes a beeline for freaking Blackfeather. So what did he tell Blackfeather that Blackfeather actually trusted this guy?
I know, exactly. I'm like, how did you get involved? Because like the only reason a band of thieves would ever, because they'll think thick as thieves, right? Like honor among thieves, but that's only if you're in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have got to be a namesay in the group, because a thief will also know that you can't trust anyone outside, because with them you don't talk outside the family, right?
Yep.
But you have to get in the family.
To get in the family.
You got to prove yourself.
Tequila and bullets is not going to get you into the family.
Not going to cut it. Then it's, unless it's not even really a family, which I don't think it is, because I don't think a lot of thought got put into this. It's just, let me show you how cool I am with my bullets and my Phantom of the Opera mask, and I did a bait and switch, and I'm really neat, and I'm a Western, and blah blah blah, and all this other stuff that is just pointless and doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make any sense.
Which again, because the ghost of the Badlands is in this situation, he set up this thing. Where the frick is Redstone in any of this? Because he's not guiding anything. He's not pointing them to where they need to hide. He's not the one that gave the tip. So he's just going to this location because the ghost told him to, so then that the ghost could execute people. And so again, he's just a servant to the ghost for no reason other than the ghost is like, I saved your life, now do what I say.
Yeah.
Because Bible.
Or else. Because Bible and God, and let me beat you over the head.
You can be a better person if you follow what I say.
Yeah, and it's like trickery and smoke and mirrors, and it's actually really dumb. I mean, when you think about it, like I swear to God, there's so many elements of this. And what bothers me next, what happens next really pissed me off because we don't ever see what leads up to this little spot here where they did the bait and switch and he saves this little family of pioneers, you know, traveling through the prairie and whatnot. And for some reason, we can't have that same thing happen for the young lady whose family was brutally slain because
Also,
reasons.
the one
But
at the beginning with the little girl. Obviously, the ghost is in a lot of places. Like, he just seems
yeah,
to be all over the place. And,
yeah, and
you know,
omnipresent.
if he's not an omnipresent, some sort of Holy Ghost thing, like if he wasn't so present, again, that kind of ruins it. But
Yeah,
his
he was.
being directly involved with all of this, if he's kind of somebody that shows up in a dire situation that then helps give somebody a second chance, which would have been the implication with the bartender and the telegram guy,
Yeah.
and then obviously this guy, if he wasn't so hands-on with murdering people, then you could have been like, okay, that's why he didn't help this other situation. If Redstone had been in charge of making sure to intercept this family instead of it being on the ghost to do it, then it would have made sense why he uses Redstone as a servant, because he can't directly interact.
That would make a lot of sense, and it could be that his last servant kicked the bucket, and he's like, "Oh shit, about time I got a new one, isn't it?"
Well, unless it's a mystical thing, and so he's kind of just a
right,
stand-in. So you don't have to have like a heavy logical
right.
reason for
You
it. You
don't
could
have
say
it
that
at
the
all.
ghost
Yeah.
in the Badlands is a metaphor for the Holy Spirit intervening in people's lives, and then, you know,
Right, because that's how it
inspiring them
is.
to go and do greater. But then if he is a metaphor for that, then he can't be physically involved in the one orchestrating all of this stuff like he is.
Have you ever seen the movie Frailty with Matthew
No.
McConaughey in it? We're gonna watch that at some point, and you're gonna see the parallels between this and that. It's almost identical in a lot of ways, but you'll see. But that's a little bit more prophetic. Frailty is actually well done, like by someone who actually knows what they're doing. But anyway, but what I was going to say was like it bothers me that we don't see how Redstone infiltrated this group. We don't see any development with him. He's got literally no personality. He's just a bag in the wind that I guess goes with whoever saves him and you know does. But we don't get anything in remotely resembles any kind of characterization with Redstone. But once Redstone and Blackfeather get away from the chaos, we find them again in like a safer area around a fire, and then fucking Redbird, or I mean Blackfeather, starts going into some expositional crap about the ghost.
So they get away. It's only Redstone and Blackfeather that get away from the ambush by the ghost, and they're just running off. We get this little section here that are like, oh my goodness, I hear all the gunfire over there. That ghost man told us to just keep going if we heard anything, and then we can stop when we get to Canyon Diablo. But then there's also, I'm not entirely sure how we got here, how this ended up with also the deed. Oh, maybe that's because okay, that's what it was. I get that. I get it now, maybe.
Oh, okay.
It's because he's working with the mayor from Diablo Canyon, sorry, Canyon Diablo.
Canyon Diablo.
So this guy was intercepting Blackfeather, bringing the deed to the place because it's a railroad deed.
It's a railroad deed, but like, does he find out about the railroad deed? But also, like, did he not know about it? And I don't know now. I guess this is where he was going to go. Maybe that was the whole thing. Now I'm thinking about it later. Oh, if that was a mistake, my bad. But even
now
still,
I'm wondering, is this the family that moves into that house that gets slaughtered later and they're looking for the deed?
You know what? Actually, that might be interesting because why would they have the deed? But unless the deed was, did they switch?
Because I don't know who these people are.
Unless it fell out of his pocket, Blackfeather's pocket, which I don't know why he would have that, but whatever. Like why he would have it on him in his possession. Because we don't know if that came from Blackfeather or the stagecoach that the ghost was on, and the ghost has just now seen this as like, uh-oh, now there's a new family that's going to be in trouble. Or was it something that belonged to the family that he just recently saved? And so this points him to the town of, you know, Canyon Diablo. but then it still kind of falls flat on its face. Because I'm like, okay, so who had that to begin with? Was that from
But see,
Blackfeather?
he would have known about it if he sent letters specifically telling Redstone to befriend Blackfeather. So then he knew that Blackfeather had something that he wanted or was trying to get something that he wanted.
Or if this is just a mess up and it's like, oh, well, I guess maybe he's not omnipresent after all because he just found out about this. So he's picking up the deed. I don't know if this is the foreshadowing because I really don't know how he would know all of this and need him for all of this. If he was just trying to get to Blackfeather, then it's like he could have fallen in with any random gang of bad guys because now this is making this seem more random instead of connected. And I feel like the goal was to make things seem connected. And I can only assume that it was Blackfeather because Blackfeather is in cahoots with the mayor of Canyon Diablo.
But then that tells me that that's why Blackfeather and his crew were going to go after these people to get the deed from them.
I don't understand. See, it's badly put in there. See, either it is or it isn't. That's the problem. Who does that deed belong to? Who did it come from? Who did it fall off of? Because either way, it just makes him look like a big asshole who set these people up after he tried to spare them from being, bushwhacked by the highwaymen, only for them to then go on and be slaughtered by those same men.
Yeah, because if these people are the people in the house later, then he shouldn't have said, hey, BT Dubs, just keep going to Canyon Diablo, because he already knows that the mayor there is corrupt and the mayor had hired people to take the deed so that he could build the railroad across.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this isn't the deed. This is the contract. So we got that. I guess I can say that.
Either way, I don't see
That's
the
all
point
that it
of
is.
that unless it was just like a foreshadowing event where it's like, oh, there's something else. I'm like, it just looks like a bunch of money fell out someplace. It doesn't look like anything to me. It still
doesn't make sense why they dropped the contract. It doesn't make sense why Blackfeather doesn't have the contract or why this specifically happened. Because
or if it even
this doesn't feel like it would be a surprise to the ghost because the ghost had already hired somebody to help him stop the township from doing what the township.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, and even if it did come from Blackfeather and he had that deed or contract, like, wouldn't he say something about it if it came from him? Like, oh shit, I dropped what I needed. But if he had gotten it from let's move on because we're going to be stuck here for hours trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, trying to figure out what it's trying to do there, which I think it's trying to telegraph, but it's telegraphing something that the characters should already know, which then makes it confusing unless we're completely misled, in which case the information, I don't know.
It's like, oh, just have blind faith in God. I'm like, I feel like God would give you an answer and he'd be a lot more clever than this because this is not clever.
Anyway, so you got Redstone over here and Blackfeather, which another situation that should have been shown here to make Blackfeather not distrust this guy, because of course this guy joins his team and then they get attacked by the ghost of the Badlands. So why would you not be immediately? And then the ghost didn't attack them because this guy was with them. How would you not be like, obviously you're an informant?
Yeah, I would be skeptical, especially if the tip came from, because we don't know where the tip came from. Or did they already have the tip and then all of a sudden that tip just led them there and he joined in? But it's like, wouldn't that make him look even more suspicious then if they had already had that tip? He knew it felt bunk. And then if he already had that assumption to begin with, it feeling like it was, hack-eyed or cockamamie or whatever he wanted to call it, like, wouldn't that seem suspicious and make Redstone look even more suspicious that once he got this tip, now somebody comes along with a bunch of gold and paying to be a part of this?
Yep.
Like, wouldn't that feel like a setup? Like,
and that the ghost let them escape, and it looks like he let them escape because Redstone was with them. Like, what a coincidence.
What a coincidence.
Especially for somebody like Blackfeather, who does as much shady dealing as he does. He would be suspicious of that. So I think that battle scene, if you're going to have the freaking ghost involved, is that you have to have Redstone fire at the ghost and save Blackfeather from something to earn Blackfeather's trust and be like, well, you could have left me behind, but you didn't. I owe you my life. Like, they needed something like that instead of just the ghost letting them run off, because the ghost not even chasing after them after slaughtering everyone looks sussy as heck.
It does look sussy. Not only that, but it's like whenever you're in that kind of world, right, you become very attuned to schmarmy behavior and what it looks like because you've done it yourself. And then you can predict it and sense it in other people to sort of navigate through the Badlands, as it were, you know, metaphorically speaking, to not get, you know, I don't know, screwed over. Like, you start to pick up on behaviors and know when and where to trust somebody and when to not. And this hasn't given us any good example of why Blackfeather should even be trusting Red Stone, Paul, you know, because he's so unmemorable. I don't care to remember how to say his name. That's the problem. He's shown me nothing that could endear me to him. And I'm sorry, I don't know what it is about, you know, people from this sphere who, and this isn't just him either. It's not just the Griftosphere people, but everyone seems to do this with their comics, is they don't know how to balance characterization and visualization with the characterization through dialogue or the visuals. Like, they don't know how to do that. And so we don't get a sense of who they are. And I don't care at that point to pronounce their name correctly, because if I can't get behind that character or whatever, but that being said, I don't know why you had said before that they're just allergic to slow scenes.
That's
unless it's
what it feels like. There are like 3 or 4 gunfire scenes in this story.
Yeah.
And all of them have to do with the ghost. And then you have scenes like this and the one at the bar where Redstone exists in the scene with either the bartender or, in this case, Blackfeather, to be like, oh, Ghost is scary, isn't he? He's so cool, though, Desio. So cool.
Senpai noticed me. But what I was saying was, like, I don't know what it is about people who don't want to slow down and have these character moments, because that is what readers like. A lot of readers like that. Me personally, I read character novels, right? You know, I love reading about characters. I don't care if there's slow moments. I actually prefer it when we slow down, because if you don't slow down, like, you're not going to retain a characterization. You're just going to retain the events in which happened, and the character's just kind of there. At least in my experience, that's what I've noticed when something is just plot versus story. Basically, this is all plot, and it's like, here, would you like some story to go along with this exposition and dialogue, sir?
So Blackfeather is talking about a bank heist. After they've settled in, he's like, okay, I'm going to tell you about the ghost of the Badlands and where he comes from, or at least where the rumors is that he came from. And he said, and he talks about, your people say civilization is on the march that my people know too well. You may have noticed Canyon Diablo is in the civilization type. There's nothing more expensive than free, and the big men that keep up with their accounts. Politicians, lumbermen, railroad tycoons, generals, those who didn't run, burned. And I find it also kind of ironic that this wants to go after the tycoons and the government. Like, I understand going after politicians and the tycoons and whatever, because we can see in like Red Dead Redemption where the outlaws have an issue with the big government. Yeah. But I also don't really understand Blackfeather specifically having an issue with townships. He's going to complain about the government chasing people out. Well, he was just trying to murder regular people to steal stuff.
Actually. And then to not only be in cahoots with the mayor at the same time, it's like, what was the point of this scene? It's like, oh, look how smarmy he is. He's a fucking thief. Of course he's smarmy. Like, we can already see that. Like,
so I don't know if this was supposed to be some kind of characterization or not, but it's really difficult for me to be listening to this guy to be like, oh, civilization and mayors and everybody freaking suck because they'll murder you and chase you out. Okay, you just came from trying to murder a family so you could steal their goods. Like, yeah.
Like, I'm supposed to, and I haven't had enough time to actually sympathize with you for it to be like, you know, even have him, you don't have to have him admit that, but you could even have like Redstone, like, wow, what a like hypocrite, or like whatnot, or like the pot calling the kettle black, is it's like he's talking about this and yet like he just did the exact same thing. It's like a lack of self-awareness, it feels like, and it's trying to be profound and poetic in some way, but it's really not. It's actually quite goofy and ham-fisted. Like I said before, all the dialogue in this has been goofy and ham-fisted. There's not 1 ounce of subtlety afforded to us when it comes to this, which is what I've always thought of God's, the hand of God being like I said earlier, it's subtle until it's not. And this
And
has
like
been nothing but
and again,
up your face.
I assume I sort of get what it's trying to do because I'm associating it specifically with the conflict in Red Dead 2, where you had the federal government moving in. And specifically, there were areas where it was victimizing the native population and they did not like the government, but they weren't going after regular townspeople either.
No, they weren't. Like they weren't, because they had a code, right?
Like
they
most
had
of
a code.
the Indians in that situation specifically were going after other like bandits on the road, or they were going after the government or military men. They weren't going after these random people that owned property. Obviously, Blackfeather is in cahoots with the mayor, but then him complaining that he has issues with these other people just feels like lip service to try to tell a specific story to the readers and not because Blackfeather actually cares about this.
Right, yeah.
From a character motivation standpoint, I don't understand why he's bringing this up to be like, well, my people have already experienced this and now your people are experiencing it because the federal government, because Blackfeather obviously doesn't care.
Right, yeah, he does not care. He's not shown. Like there's these moments where it's like I don't know if it's trying to character. Like he gets more characterization than Redstone does. I can tell you that right now. Like he really does. Like it's like, are we sure we have the right main character? But one thing that I've noticed is that like this is such a wasted scene to me. It doesn't mean anything because like I don't see why Blackfeather would actually even open up to him about this kind of stuff, or why they'd even be talking about the ghost. This is just like, ooh, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, government bad, government take everything from us. Like
I think this would have been a better moment spent actually trying to create what some of the legends of the ghost are. And it didn't need it didn't need to be like politicians and lumbermen and blah, 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 because it would be a word of mouth lore that is spread around. And so what he could be doing is like, well, some people say that he is the vengeance of these townships that were taken over by the federal government moving in. And some say that the ghost of the Badlands is this vengeance of this other thing. But I think that he is this thing because this is who I've seen him attack.
I believe it's a Cheyenne that believe that an avenging spirit known as like the Crazy Dogs. Or the Dog Soldier, really Crazy Dog Soldier, and it's somebody who does the avenging, and it's all sort of like an accumulation of like their spiritual beliefs that create this figment. And there might be some Native Americans who are Cheyenne can probably clock me on that. I'm only thinking about what I remember hearing. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But yeah, like you could even have that happen where it's like, I mean, even the bartender at the beginning was like, I've heard people call him Brimstone or the High Plains missionary.
Start building the lore of the rumors that the bartender mentioned, or building on them in this scene by making it mystic and not being so specific. But here he just goes on about first the government being bad and people moving in. And then he talks about this bank heist that happened, that this is the lore of the freaking ghost, where he was part of this bank heist. And then he turned on all of the guys once they got out and then killed them all. And the government moved in and wanted the location. And those who didn't get out, those who couldn't run out, everything got lit up on fire as the government or whoever just kind of took over everything. And the guy went back into the fire to try to save a child. And then once he saved the child, he wandered off into the desert.
Oh yes, look how virtuous I am. I saved a child.
That's the Phantom of the Opera thing right there, because obviously covered in flames. And
oh my God, you're right. He's probably burned from head to toe, dude.
Yes, I told you it was the Phantom of the Opera.
The Phantom of the Opera, the Phantom of the High Plains, dude.
So then as he's going on about this, then a U.S. Marshal shows up to grab the two because there were bullets. The sounds of bullets in the area from the stagecoach that got attacked earlier.
I love the Blackbird's expression, the one at the top. Look at his face. No, up further. That one right there. Yeah, that's so funny. Oh, I giggled. I wiggled.
So then they're going to be taken over here to Canyon Diablo,
which I'm assuming that's where we were to begin with, and we're back. We started
where the mayor or the sheriff has died. They're burying the sheriff right now. And
who died.
Mm-hmm. And so the mayor is coming out of the jail when he's greeted by the marshal. And the marshal is like, hey, I brought you these guys.
And now I need a witness. Because I think he needs a little girl that for some reason, like.
Oh, yeah, that is it. Because he didn't catch him in the commission of the crime. And so they need a witness.
Yeah, they need a witness to prove that it was them, or that he committed the crime that, you know, the little girl witnessed him do, which I'm sure, because it doesn't say that he never didn't like kill the family.
The marshal was called over for special circumstances due to the disturbances on the road. They're holding Black Feather and Redstone on account of being the only gunman in the area and the wreckage of that stagecoach. This is a reference to the carriage attack at the beginning.
Yeah, the very beginning. Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah. So there was, because of all the stagecoaches in the area, or stagecoach thefts in the area and attacks in the area, they called the U.S. Marshal in. And so then they're like, a local woman of negotiable virtue is taking care of the only young witness that they have. And I had some questions about that. So he's going to go.
Yeah, I did too.
But my question was, one, why are you needing to say that this chick is of questionable virtues? Why can't she just be a regular church woman or a regular nice woman that gave her house to this child? Because
why would the ghost even drop her off there in the first place?
That's another thing. It brings into question the freaking ghost. He's out here hunting down all of these bad guys, and then he leaves this child in the hands of a questionable woman. So, I mean, maybe the mayor is just a pig that thinks every woman is of questionable values, but you would think that there would at least be some women in this town that have a good reputation in which the ghost would leave the child with.
Or why not even leave? So this is why that Redstone needed to be taken in to that family that we're about to meet. And that little girl should have gone with that family too, because they will basically place a child with an upstanding member of their community to keep until they find a relative to send her to. They would not just give her to a whore, which is basically what he's saying she is. She's a gaming girl. She's a saloon girl. Or we don't really even see it, or I don't know.
Like, we see the lady that she comes in with, and she looks fine.
Yeah, she looks fine. Like, there's nothing in there that even says that she's anything but another woman helping this little girl.
I mean, like, freaking some of there are chicks in the Red Dead group that have their bustiers open and everything that look more questionable. This woman is covered from neck to ankle.
Yeah, this is like a freaking Quaker right here.
So I don't know why we had to take shots at this negotiable virtues thing.
I don't know.
And call her Clabberfoot Annie. Since she's just a walk-on role, you could have just had it be regular, but it feels like it needed to slap women as being whores, because your only options for women in these stories is
be a little girl,
a child, or you're a whore.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Or you're
married.
That teenage girl who I'm assuming that was a teenage girl. I don't know, but like, yeah, the whatever women.
It's just unnecessary. It's not real. It's not actual characterization. It didn't do anything to this. And so then he brings the little girl in and it's like, okay, can you identify anybody in this room? And then she's looking at this guy and she recognizes him, but she doesn't say anything. So it's either she's so traumatized that she can't say anything, or for some reason she thinks that she now has protecting this guy. But I mean, she's obviously traumatized. She's shaking.
Right.
But like, what did they think that they were going to get out of this situation?
I don't know. But also to me, it's like, since apparently the woman said that she had like been freaked out into silence, muteness, basically she's not talking. So he wants her to point at the person who did this. And I'm like, what in the world? There is not a child that I can think of that would sit there and not say or point at a man unless they were terrified of him, right? You know, he was going to come and get them. That would not want, that's the man that killed my ma and my pa. And ruined my life. That's him. Why would it even matter that he spared her? Because now she just remembers that he killed her family. She has to be alive to remember that he killed her family. And now, unless the Phantom told her, oh, don't say nothing to them because I need this guy, but we don't ever see that. It's just, oh, my good deed for sparing this little girl is just going to get, like, no. If I saw that man and I was that kid, I'd be like, that's the one. string him up. And now I'm inferring, but I'm projecting, but like, doesn't make sense. Well, because we don't know that
it wasn't characterized enough to give her a reason to not, unless, like you said, she's afraid of this guy killing her, in what, like, coming after her. But in that case, she would be afraid of him
run away.
She would be afraid of him coming after her if he got out.
Yeah. And not only that, but like, she didn't, the way she reacts later, it's like she turns her head and she's just no interest in saying anything at all. It's like, if she was really afraid of him, like, I could imagine maybe she would have run out and cried or started crying, or because that's a really traumatic thing that she went through. They're just seeing somebody that you saw do this to your family and left you in a home, an orphan, and put you in this town where there's a bunch of questionable people everywhere, because that's what it looks like to me, except for the woman. But anyway, like, I feel like she would have a different reaction, is what I think. I feel she would have a different reaction because of what I know about kids.
Yeah, it just felt like a plot convenience.
Plot armor convenience
to just be like, well, she's not going to say anything, because the fact that she's not going to say anything means that they get to let the guys go. But also, like, it's also really stupid because this guy is in leagues with Blackfeather, so there must have been other ways that they could let him out of jail after Marshall left, because that's if the Marshal is going to stick around after they book these guys.
I also make the Marshal look really stupid too.
The sheriff probably called the Marshal.
Yeah.
And the mayor took over because the sheriff's now dead. So then the mayor wants to get rid of the Marshal.
And, it could have been to where the point where the Marshal came in, because like the sheriff, wherever these people had gone, might have been out of that sheriff's jurisdiction. So that's why the U.S. Marshal. But since, I mean, what's the point of a U.S. Marshal when Arizona isn't even a state? So anybody can do anything at that point. So, oh well.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused. Again,
I am too.
Whatever.
Maybe I'm stupid. I don't know my history like I should, but it just common sense tells me that this thing and this thing, and there's something in the middle that's not there. It's not adding up like it needs to. That's what I think. But
so then the Marshal leaves because he's all pissed off. He leaves pissed off because these guys are going to be let go since they don't have a witness to keep them in place. And so then once they're released, Blackfeather's like, I'm going to go get a drink. You do you. I'll find you later. Maybe whatever. And Bible Man shows up.
Oh, God.
Like Spider-Man from the roof to throw a letter at this guy to give him his next orders, which, again, it might have actually been better here to not make Bible Man look as bad as he looks all the time, because obviously Bible Man knows what's going on here. Maybe have somebody run into Redstone, like with a shoulder, and then put the scroll in his hand, and then that guy has the necklace. Like, have somebody in this village or in this township be a servant to that guy.
He looks so uninterested in anything he's doing. That's the problem I have. That's why I don't buy that he's doing this unless he's being held hostage by the ghost saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you or something like that. You're going to die the same way that your friends did. And that at my hands. And
I don't know if that's what is at risk here, because in the initial note, it was like, you can go and live your life the way that you were living your life. And I think in more case, well, the way I would interpret that is him going, if you go back to your life of crime, the next time I find you, I will not spare you. But I don't think it's an immediate execution, but that's what I would take it as. So you either follow what I've told you, or next time I meet you, I will not show mercy, which is still a threat of behave me or die.
I don't know if basically it is, but not only that, but like, since we don't have any real time with Redstone, the way he's kind of moving through this is like he is the equivalent. We were just talking about this an hour ago about characters who are not making things happen, but things are happening to them. That is what we refer to as an inactive protagonist. Redstone is an inactive protagonist. He is not proactive. He is inactive. Things are happening to him versus him making things happen. He has people holding his hand the entire way, giving him what he needs. The ghost comes in and gives him notes, tells him where to go. And if it's not the ghost, it's somebody else giving him money. The proprietor of this fine establishment, wherever in Two Guns, he meets and finds, freaking Black Feather. And even at the beginning, but just because he hesitated in killing that girl, he still killed her parents.
Yeah,
he still had a hand in that. He freaking loot and pillaged their freaking wagon as they were trying to get across the prairie. It's like, but because he spared a child, that all of a sudden that makes him good. There's a bunch of people who did that, but that doesn't make or disregard what they did. No characterization in which I would just buy this, because you spared a child. It's such a cheap trick, for one thing, to have people sympathize with him and be like, oh, well, he saved this poor innocent little girl with her cute little face. What's like, well, he just murdered her family, or he helped to murder her family.
He could have just done what everybody does with the dark romances. And instead of the opening scene, just have all the guys be like, yo, Paul, help us hold the girl down so we can have our way with her. And then he shoots one of them because he's not going to be a pedophile. And then they all turn on him to shoot him. There you go.
Wait a minute. That would have worked too. It's like, dude, I'd rather put a bullet in her head and end her life now instead of have her endure something like that. Yeah, why not? Just have him not even care. He's going to kill them. But then they try to invite him in on that. And he finds out what they're going to do with this little girl. You even make
tell me this is however old this guy is. That was the first time that there's ever been a child involved in any of his heists.
Yeah,
he's been on freaking trains, robbing people on the trains.
Excuse me, you have a conscience. Hey, get the fuck out of my face, dude. I'm not. Whatever.
So then we switch. So he gets his letter. We get vagueness with the letter. So again,
oh God, vagary.
I want to remind people that when you're writing a script or writing a story, it's not suspense to hide things from the audience, because then we're just in blindness going, well, what's going to happen next? What actually causes more suspense for the reader is, okay, now we know this thing is happening. Will the person get there in time to stop it?
What's going to happen next?
And so then a lot of people do this thing. I freaking am thinking of Grady Hendrix in the vampire book, where the chick went into the attic and she saw the box and then looked in the box, and it didn't show you what the picture was in the box. It just alluded she's looking in the box. And a lot of movies do this too, where they show you somebody discovering something and then being like, oh gosh. And then it skips the scene and you don't get shown what it is. And people think that it causes suspense to not know what's going to happen, but suspense is knowing that there's a bomb in the building, and are they going to be able to turn it off before it goes off in 2 minutes?
Also, vagary is not subtlety is not vagary. Okay, vagary is uninteresting. Subtlety is when you get this idea that something more could be going on. You're already aware of all the elements that are put in front of you, but what else is going on? And you got to figure that out, and we're going to figure it out. It's not fun. It's just lazy. I wouldn't say lazy. It's just amateurish. That's what I think. It's amateurish, writing. It's ooh, vagary. I mean, Eric July does this. A lot of people do this, no matter what. Rippaverse did this. This is doing this very obviously. It's their vagueness is just so stupid. And then
and not to use myself as an example, but I just read it yesterday since I was recording. But the first chapter of Bodymore Zero tells Ralph multiple times, you need to get away from Casey or you're going to get killed. You know what happens in the next chapter? Casey gets killed. Because Ralph gets attacked and then Casey gets killed, but he almost gets killed in that chapter because the book tells you straight up what is at risk. It doesn't go, or something bad is going to happen, or vagaries, or vagaries.
Ooh,
these are the stakes, and it builds on the tension from telling you the stakes.
Yeah, this just shows
you can use vagary in some cases for suspense, but this is not how to do it.
A character being vague about something, and you're like, okay, you're hiding something, and the character that he's hiding it from knows it, but they can't confirm it, so they have to keep going. And you can there's just a lot of ways to do it. This shows me that I feel a lot of these people do not fucking read. They don't read books. They just look at movies and think that it might be easier to make a book or a comic. And it's actually a lot more sophisticated than people give it credit for. And I'm getting real tired of seeing it because I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like, there's footsteps behind this person. Who could it be? Cut the scene, new character. That's so infuriating. Like,
oh, see,
whatever.
we can go to George's comic for an example too, because you have Mary who's on that cruise, and you have Songbird who says, by the way, you know, Songbird spends time with Mary, and the heist is going to happen that night after they spend time together, and Songbird actually bonds with Mary. And he's like, don't leave your room. One, you already know that something bad is going to happen because of the way that he has been. And number two, it's like on the next page where something bad happens. So it's really the don't leave your room is the intro to the bandits.
Right. Like,
ship.
The other thing, as it's about to happen. Go on.
The other thing is in the later issues of Mary Sue, when she's talking to the merman and she's asking what she needs, why she's there. And it doesn't vaguely reference what happens if she picks the wrong person. The prince tells her, oh yeah, we're all going to die. Like, whoever doesn't get picked gets to die. And then she gets to go, I am not prepared to make this decision. Why did my godfather send me here?
Yeah. Also harken back to like what she had said earlier to that child, like, we're all going to die anyway. And now it's like, oh wow, now people are actually about to die. Like, because of a choice I'm going to make.
Yeah.
Or have to make. And that's big. And it's like, I swear, like, I don't know. Excuse me, but I agree. Like, you can find so many examples of this working, you know, movies and books, and like, you know, I just don't know where they're getting their, you know, I don't know what they're gleaning in terms of learning from. Like, I just don't. I've learned from books. I read books. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people misunderstand how this works, or they have really bad people around them that just aren't going to be honest with them about, hey, look, I don't think this works. Let's try to figure out what we can do to make this work, make it stronger. Because anything and almost everything can be improved with feedback, good feedback. And that's finding people that you can trust. I trust you to be honest with me. And, you know, and yeah, sure, feedback can really suck. It really can. But if it's there, you know, it's from what I've come to find out, it's a balance between, is my heart lying to me, or should I trust my instinct on this, especially within the indie community, because you are in control of everything that you're doing, basically. And you have the choices at your hand, and nobody can make you do anything. But it's really about towing that line. I've seen just from what people have told me and their experiences that they've shared with me. You know, when they got feedback, it's like, sometimes I don't know, sometimes I do. And it's like, you got to listen to people. And I feel like whoever did this just did not, I don't know, this feels like a caricature of a Western. It's not really doing anything new and exciting, not in my opinion. There's tons of weird Westerns out there. There's tons of them that have done something similar to this and have done it a lot better. A lot better.
So then we switch over here to Blackfeather talking to the mayor about joining high society. And we get also these vague couple of panels down here where, like I said, from the guy earlier, we got the telegram guy wearing the necklace. So obviously he has something to do with Bible Man.
Wait a minute. Is that actually the little girl from the, go back, go to her. Is that her? Yeah. Are they the same people? No, surely not.
She's the only one that we see. So like,
looks like a little girl. So,
but if you look right here, she's not a little girl.
You're right. Holy crap. Did he set them up? Is that the same people?
I don't know. So we got these old people and this young woman, and then we come up here.
I don't like how her face looks that young, but that's just me. Okay, so
she just mentions sending the servants and then coming in here.
And her family's dead.
And her family's dead. So, I mean, there are two of them that in this room. I don't know if there are any in the other room. I don't know if this is the daughter. I don't know if this is...
The wife
The
or
wife,
a sister?
I just know that it says that there are servants.
So we're the servants.
That should be all the provisions we need for the lease, at least for a little piece. I know you said that shopping would build character, but next time we might solicit the servants to do. And that's all that we know about this woman.
Yeah, that's all we know.
So we don't know if she is.
Because if that's supposed to be her, they did not do a good job of indicating that those are the same people.
And
They're just not.
And I don't know if they are. Like, that's me going, I don't know what this connection is. So they may not be. That might be making up connections.
Yeah. Making up connections, but either way, either a connection or no connection, the ghost still looks like a big fat asshole.
Yep.
Because he set them up. But anyway, here we get to the climax.
Because he knew that was going to happen, which is one of the things we're assuming. I mean, we didn't see the letter, but yeah, he knows what was going on because he sent the mayor. So that lady in the house may not actually be the ones from the cart. Might be me trying to find a connection between any of this stuff, because I was also trying to make sense of that stupid contract. Again, where did it come from? What was it?
Where did it come from? But I can only, because it's railroad. It's obviously a railroad, and then it has something to do with this. But we don't even get this girl's name. We get a name for her. I don't know, because again, like, I don't know if those are supposed to be the same people, because this is a visual thing. You have to tell us that these are the same people, because I'm sorry, but no matter how vague you want to be, or you want to do the show don't tell type of stuff, you're not doing a very good job at it. I can tell you that right now, because I don't know how to connect those two, because
they went to this house to get the deed. That's why they're here. They went to here to get the deed, and they mentioned that they're going to find the deed. Now, this doesn't really make sense, because this family lives here. They're obviously in the middle of nowhere. And so they just own all of this area. So if all of these people died, then the mayor could have swooped in and just stolen the land, because it's not like there's going to be anybody else to fight over it.
Yeah, because like, we don't know if they have to make bank payments on it or not, or it's completely paid off. They don't have to pay it because the bank can't take it. But the railroad, from what I can understand, because it showcased the railroad a couple of times, that they want that land because it's going to be uno mucho big time money for them. You know, grande, whatever, excuse me, my Spanish is terrible. That's the only thing I can surmise. And like, okay, so if they kill her, you know, then I guess the property is then therefore transferred over to her. And then they went there. I don't know what's going on.
If they just disappeared her, it wouldn't have mattered. So they're here. They killed the whole family. So the mayor went here to check on his telegram, or his assistant, because Mr. Harlow hadn't come back from sending the telegram. Yeah. When he gets to the telegram station, the telegram guy is there. And so then he sends the telegram saying that he's procured the property that they needed to build the railroad through that property. Then he thinks he hears something, or maybe the door is open. I'm not entirely sure, because he looks in a direction, goes outside, and then he sees his assistant lying dead in the railroad tracks. Somebody was obviously kind of angry because his eyeball is gone.
And he's like covered in those like railroad, what are they called again? Railroad deeds, contracts. They're something. In Reddit, they say them all the time. I can't remember what it was, but they're worth a lot of money. You sell them, they're worth a lot of money. And
why are they all covered in blood? Why did he leave them behind?
Because it's blood money.
Why? But if you own all of these shares, just take them. Give them to people in town who need them. You know, like the ones fostering the children.
So my thing is, okay, so he's about to say that, oh, I got the property. So maybe the people on that property didn't want to sell the land.
I assume that.
Yeah, I assume that too. But like didn't want to sell to the railroad, and so the railroad probably wouldn't come through. But I don't even know how far away this town is, or this house from this town is. I don't know where anything is. Like, yes, it's beautiful to look at. George, you did a wonderful job. He did a wonderful, wonderful job at this. But I cannot tell where the hell I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, because
there's no characterization.
This is literally in the middle of nowhere. Where is the town? Where is Canyon Diablos in comparison to this?
Yeah,
I don't see. Is she just walking in the gate? So like, did she just walk to town? Did she not take a horse to town?
no wagon, no nothing that indicates that why should I care about this person? They're just a random plot device to push the story forward because there really is no story.
And where is this in relation to anything? Obviously, this telegram office isn't anywhere in freaking Diablo, because otherwise there would be something nearby. Which maybe it is in the middle of nowhere. We saw some of those in Red Dead, but then
we did. I just don't know the direction. There's like, and it looks beautiful. And this is not a knock on George at all, but I think George just worked with what he had. There's no character in any of this. Like, that's one of the fun aspects about towns and stuff, is giving them character and life, but there's literally no life in any of this.
Yeah, I don't get where this town is. I don't get how this town operates. I don't, like, at least if we go all the way back here to our outward shot of the canyon, like, you could have put, we got like there are a bunch of little houses in the back here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see
we got this, we got these, whatever these are. So you could have put the telegram station somewhere over here, put something here to show
a railroad,
or a sign that says telegram that way, so you can show that the telegram is related to this, because this telegram station doesn't seem related at all. And the only thing that also makes it feel somewhat related is that you've got, where's that guy? This guy, who is also looked like the one from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same guy. That's what I can only assume, because it's like, why would it even show him again? It makes no freaking sense. But I was going to say was like, okay, so maybe there is no railroad going through Canyon Diablo, and the only way the railroad can go through Canyon Diablo is if it goes through those people's land, but maybe they don't want it to go through their land, and so that's why they decided to kill them. For one, it's big money, but even if the railroad were to go through these people's lands, they'd still be getting a lot of money for it, or something that, from what I understand, they would have been getting some compensation for that, but maybe they didn't want to sell it because they don't want their land interfered. And that was something that did happen a lot of the time back then, when the railroad was getting built across this country.
In which case, I think this land needs to be more developed to show like what they're trying to build, because like how much investment do you have in this area when there's no barn, no animals, no nothing, that you don't want to have anything built through it?
And it's like, where are the servants? Like, there's no servants' quarters. There's no nothing. This is the main house. This just looks like a random small house. Like, there's no anything. Like, it's well drawn and stuff like that, but it's just,
it doesn't give you a sense of location.
No sense of location, except we're in Arizona, i.e. the desert. Well, yeah, it looks
developed. Yeah.
And if the mayor wanted the railroad to go through the town, it looks like it's already kind of going through the town anyway, because it's there. So I don't know what in the world the purpose of him getting the deed to that land would have been, other than just to get more money. Or if he wanted the railroad to go through the town because maybe Canyon Diablo is not doing that great and it needs like some new life coming to it. It needs a railroad and stuff like that, but there's already a railroad going through it. And if this isn't Canyon Diablo, where the hell is this then?
Yep. So we go from this scene right here outside of the telegram with the dead guy to switching back over to Blackfeather, who's taken that woman that he had the knife to her neck into the Apache rape cave, which is what he calls it.
Yeah.
And he throws her down in there, and he's like, you're going to tell me where the deed is. And she's like, she actually says something worse than, you've already killed my family. You can't do any worse than that, because it tries to be something, it tries to make it poetic.
I don't know, this old English, like, this is not how people, like, oh my God,
I have it written down here. So, oh, there we go. Nothing you do to my mortal shell can compound my indignity.
Oh my God. Okay, so one thing, you realize when people use these random accents, because like you can tell idioms with the way something is written, the way the words flow together. This is like clearly a Southern Belle type. That's a specific culture, right? And that's not out west. West and South are two very different things. Saying that, that's not something that someone in the West would say. From what I have read and learned about it, they never talked like that unless they were in higher society. But what society are they in when it looks like they're in the middle of nowhere?
That's true.
And then it's like, you go like, because Daisy talks kind of like that, but except she doesn't sound like a pretentious.
But she lives also in a township.
She does. She lives in a township. She lives in a township in Louisiana. So she has that accent. She has that sort of thing. You have to develop culture around the way people speak, right? And that's something that's very important, and it drives me nuts. Like, that's inferring to me that she has a non-rhotic accent similar to the Big Daddy, Big Sugar over there trying to get his hands on everything in this, in Canyon Diablo. Which, by the way, that's a stupid name. Canyon Diablo, Canyon Devil. Okay, Bible man. All right. So, like, I'm sorry. I get so annoyed with this stuff because it's just, it's like, let me act like a Western without being one. Because this is not a Western. This is just window dressing. Remember you said that about Guns and Smoke, that it was basically window dressing. This is what this is window dressing. It's wearing Western face. It is not actually a Western. It doesn't have the spirit of one. It doesn't have anything even remotely resembling what would make me find it to be Western at all. It's just something that kind of looks like it's a cosplay of a Western. Like, I don't know if if what's his name, RazörFist, actually watches or reads Westerns. If he doesn't, I can recommend you some good Westerns, dude. You got Lonesome Dove. You've got like freaking Riders of the Purple Sage, you know, The Lonesome Valley of the Gods by Louis L'Amour. You have a bunch of these really amazing people that do great Westerns. Anything that Larry McMurtry's done, he's done a bunch of stuff for the Western genre. If you want to be a bit more prophetic and kind of like subvert the Western genre, read Blood Meridian or read anything that Cormac McCarthy wrote, because he did a lot of Westerns too. Like, actually study what you're gonna write in. And that drives me nuts because it doesn't feel like there's any love for this genre anymore. It's just people wanting to capitalize on something that is clearly coming out of slumber. And I'm sick of it. Excuse me.
Not just that, but it's also some level of, I feel like, politicizing, because like you said, this is American lore. And so if you're going to appeal to a certain demographic that is very Americana, what are you going to do? You're going to try to revive the genre that is American lore.
That's the sense I get. Like,
like you said, it doesn't feel anything like a Western. Like, the story is not Western. The characters are not Western. It's trying to be, and the visuals make it feel Western. But I feel like this would be much more Western without the dialogue.
It would be much more Western without the dialogue. I could actually put together a story outside of this dialogue. Like, you got a renegade Indian, which I feel like.
Also, take out Bible Man. No Bible Man.
No Bible Man. Get rid of that hack. Oh my God. That was such, like, because he's so, it's like he only comes up when it's convenient for Redfern or Redstone. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Like, again, like I said, he has no personality. I get more character from everyone else but Bible Man and Redstone. You know, the two people who are supposed to be the main characters. Like, I'm sorry, but I get so triggered over bad written crap that could easily have been fixed if somebody knew what they were doing. Like, I just sit here and I look at this and it's like, oh, why did we even bother keeping her? What's the point?
That was it. So that was one of the questions that I had, because obviously in this last scene with them, you've got some dead, what looks like at least one of these would be a dead woman on the ground. Yeah, but if they killed everyone that was in there, and if she's not the wife, if she's the daughter, then you've got a dead mom and a dead daughter, or a dead wife and a dead father, and possible dead servants if the servants were anywhere in here. I don't know where servants would be at this point.
I don't see any servants either.
But if you've got that, then he's obviously killed women, which means he's not going to have an issue with killing a woman. So why wouldn't he kill this woman? And he says that we're going to get that deed from you. But if you abduct and or murder everybody that was in that house, then you can just steal the land, because who is going to stop you? The sheriff is dead. The freaking, this land is in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's going to notice except for maybe her family. And guess what? You've already hired mercs and freaking bandits to hang out there. Just have them hang out there to kill anybody who shows up.
Yeah, unless she had relatives like back east or whatever that could come and procure that land. But like, it's like, they don't ever say that. It's like, you're here going to sign this over to the mayor. But the mayor beforehand said, like, well, I already have the land in my favor. Like, I own the land now.
I'm assuming that he assumed that they had collected the land because he said Blackfeather. But what should have happened in this scene, instead of Blackfeather being like, little lady, you're going to give us that deed because my boss wants me to get it from you, he should have been like, look, in the previous scene where Blackfeather was talking to the boss would have asked, boss, what would you like us to do with the people there? And he could have said, I don't care, just get rid of them. And he's like, what about the young lady? And he says, anything that you like. And so then Blackfeather can abduct the woman because the woman is attractive and he didn't have orders to kill them all. So then that would have made sense. And it also would have been like, oh, look, they have procured the land because there are no owners of the land still there.
Here's your money. Here's your bitch. Go and do whatever you want with her. Like, yeah, like instead of just taking her because they want to do a little hero, you know, save the day, damsel in distress stuff, which I don't mind a damsel in distress story. I really don't. It's just I would prefer to somebody would actually do something unique with it. And this is not unique at all in any way, shape, or form. Her saying, there's nothing you can do to me that you haven't already done, whatever. I'm like, wow, that's not been said about 100,000 times over and over again. Like, oh, we're gonna, like, I understand what the obsession with rape is, which I don't think it's a bad thing to you know, like, you know, allude to it or incorporate it into a story, but like have some freaking dignity with it, because it's not just because it's a touchy subject, but because it's so seldom well written that it just feels like it either comes across as trying to be hero savior complex or you have a kink. From what I've seen in the last few years, at least, with books that include rape in it. Like, oh, well, we're going to keep this girl because, oh, we need some place for Redstone to come in.
Yep, and that's all that happens. Is so he sits here and he tells her, do you want to know how this got the name, the Apache Death Cave? And so then he just talks about the Navajos and the Apache fighting each other, and one tribe killed a bunch of them and then stole their women and then raped the women and then hid in the cave. And then the other tribe, the other tribe covered the cave with a rock so they couldn't get out. And then we're like asking, what did you do with the women? And then the one in the cave, we're like, well, you don't want to know what we did with the women. So then the one in the power control murdered all of them and raped their women in return, and also threw fire in the cave to light everybody on fire. So I don't really know how we ended up with also raping the women and everything being lit on fire, but whatever.
Look how bad we are. We're going to light stuff on fire and rape all the women. And because you raped our women, I'm going to rape your women now. Like, what is the point of this scene other than like, oh, look, I know a little bit of freaking Navajo and Native American history.
That's all that it really feels like, honestly, because there's nothing here except to slow the guy down because he's taking off his pants when one of them gets shot, because, oh, Redstone is here to stop them. And this guy is suddenly like, how dare you, you conniving gimp. But it's like, what relationship did you have? You didn't trust Redstone. You didn't tell him any of your plans and what you were going to do. Anything. You weren't friends. So what do you mean conniving gimp?
Like, how
you are all bandits.
You're all bandits. Like, oh,
you don't know this guy.
No, we never see him get to know Redstone. We don't ever see him develop any kind of a relationship with Redstone. And anytime we got close to seeing that, something interrupted it. Like the moment when the U.S. Marshal turned up and arrested them both and took them back to Diablo Canyon, or Canyon Diablo, excuse me. The Devil's Canyon. So, excuse me, I get irritated with naming conventions too. Irritates me a lot.
So obviously Redstone is going to murder all of them without a problem at all, because he's just such a sharpshooter with his left hand that he can kill everybody and saves the woman. Yeah. And then we switch back over to Fat Daddy Lucifer Blackheart, and he's like, oh no, Marshal, there's the murder. Come over here. And then he sees who he thinks is the Marshal on the railroad tracks. But wouldn't you have it, it's actually Bible Man.
It's Bible Man.
Because he never went far. And so then Bible Man, being a sadist and not actually a god, shoots him in the arm. And then look, okay, where are we? Like, you see, there's nothing everywhere. And you remember, okay, you recall way back here before the rape cave that this was set in the middle of nowhere, it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, how far did Bible Man let this guy run while bleeding in the Arizona when we end up on a cliff?
Is that it over there? The
I guess that might be it right there.
Is that it right there? Is that a rock? What is this?
That's not even right up against it like it should be. If it's
no. And I'm sorry, but in the Arizona desert, and he's fat and he's bleeding out.
He's sweating profusely.
How far is he really gonna get?
He's probably going 1 mile an hour. Let's be real. And so
Dude,
you
I just
basically have
fucking give up. I'd
Bible
be like,
Man.
I'm done. Just kill me, Bible Man. Just please put me out of my misery. I
You just
don't want to
have Bible
run.
Man doing It Follows, like the horror movie, just slowly following after this guy as he runs. But he like keeps stopping to breathe because he's out of breath and he's so fat and it's so hot. And Bible Man just stops because he's waiting for this guy to get to the edge of this cliff to make it a cooler kill. Like there's no reason for Bible Man to not catch up and just execute, because there's no way that this guy was outrunning Bible Man.
There's no way. And there's also like, he's not even saying anything either as he's chasing him. He's not trying to let this guy know why he died. He's just going to kill him. You know, like, I'm just going to chase you down here, Bible Man. Is he saying anything to him at all? Like the righteous, whatever. He's just Papa. Oh, that's another thing too. Like if
just imagine if this whole time he was like, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. As he just like follows after him.
What about Salty the singing Bible joins him?
Anyway, so he's like, no, you can't stop progress. I am progress. And then he pulls a gun because all that he keeps doing, literally, he's just still getting yelled at that you can't stop progress. And the mayor is the progress. And this guy with his gun out that never ends, that he's never had to be that close for to kill people with, has to get closer and give this guy a chance to shoot just so that he can have a cooler pew, 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 pew.
Paw. Actually, I call it the Paw gun. Paw and Meemaw.
It didn't even need to happen like that. But so they just wanted this shot. That's all I can imagine it was written this way for, the scene to play out. Obviously, more Bible verses happen. Then we switch over to the woman being brought back home and standing there with Paul. And he's like, anyway, I said now, ma'am, my words that I said now, ma'am, would seem a hollow comfort. So he's just like, good luck. Just I reckon if you turn your eyes upward, you're likely to survive. So like she loses her entire family and he's like, basically, don't be traumatized.
That's basically what he said. Also, another thing, you're one to talk, you freaking dimbo. All right, listen, you have had everyone holding your hand the entire time this story has been going. You were spared, even though every right under the sun, every physical medical law there is, after being blown away by that many bullets, you somehow walk away with just missing your arm. Your right hand got cut off, but when you have had so many bullets flown into you, like you have been punctured, you shouldn't be alive, or you shouldn't be able to move for weeks. Also, the passage of time in this is bizarre as well. We don't know how much time has really passed from when he was attacked to when he lost his arm, because that's a significant injury. That's just not something that you recover from in a night or two. There's going to be phantom pain. There's going to be pain in general. Like that's really
well. And he
big.
was also full of holes. So it wasn't like that was the only one that he had. He would be fighting off infection for a while.
He would be. That's not something that it's stupid how it happened. It really is. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, oh, he got shot. That's also not like this hasn't happened in a lot of Westerns before, but in the first Red Dead Redemption, John Marston gets shot and is taken in by a people and has to heal from his wound, right? He's like, oh, you slept for about 3 or 4 days, but he didn't lose his arm. He got shot in the arm, which if you're a rough and tough man, you could probably walk that off. But this guy got blown to pieces.
He was Swiss cheese.
Yeah, he was Swiss cheese. Like I said, he should have been whistling every time the wind blowed.
Again, there were so many choices in this that feel like they were made for how cool it looks and not for actually a mixture of substance. It wasn't, and you can do a mixture of believability and making it cool, but like filling this guy full of holes instead of, hey, maybe if you did one in his arm that would then sever the blood veins in his arm and they like kick or they break his hand or something, anything that would focus on the right hand because that was the hand his gun was in specifically, and then you could do the symbolism in that.
That could have been great too. Like, or it could have been even cooler than that. Like, he gets left behind. Maybe he gets shot in his arm, right? Or gets shot someplace else, and he gets left behind. But the reason but his arm could have been saved. And so he's trying to crawl to find some safety, right, or whatever. And they don't necessarily shoot him. They just wander off or whatever, leave him for dead. But what if he got bit by like a rattlesnake and they had to cut up his arm before the, venom went any further?
That too. There are so many ways that this could have been done in a different thing. And it feels like it maximized wanting to do cool gunfights.
Yeah.
Over variations in the story that would actually make sense for the character, and then focus on the character. So this is more or less the answer.
Yeah.
Thanks. Don't be traumatized.
Don't be traumatized.
Thank you.
Even though she's almost been raped, she's walked in on her family.
Being murdered. Her house is empty now. Whoever was providing her for her family, for her life, is now gone.
We don't know what happened to the servants because we never saw them. But not only that, but like if they did the whole rattlesnake thing, bit him, that would have been a total cool callback to True Grit. Like, oh my gosh, like it really would have, except it'd be a man instead of a little girl. But it's just ridiculous. And then the last
it also would have made it make more sense for his healing time, because they would have shot him like once, kicked him a couple of times, and then walked off. And so then he is trying to crawl to something, then gets bit in the hand. He wouldn't have as many physical wounds to heal from.
No, he wouldn't
his body full of holes.
But then he's thinking like, okay, well, I passed out. I should be dead, but how did I end up here? Who took me here? And then he sees a letter next to him, and it's like, the ghost? Is he real? Did I just get saved by him? Like, I thought that was a fever dream.
Maybe he wakes up while the ghost is cutting off his arm out in the prairie.
Oh my God, yeah. And he's like, and
then he passes out again from the pain, but he wakes up briefly, and it makes it feel more delusional because he remembers the rattlesnake, and then he remembers waking up in pain, and then he wakes up in a room.
And then we get another ham-fisted Bible verse.
You've got Paul going off into the sunset, the Bible verse of, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, and I will make thee a ruler over many things. And so that gives the implication that he is God.
Or he's alluding to that Bible verse. I can't remember which one it was, where it's like, and his Lord said unto him that, thank you for your few good deeds, and I will make you ruler over many. It's something like that. I will reward you, basically.
Well, I think it is a specific allusion to that, but I think that's what specifically is saying he is God, because he's looking at this guy saying, you have obeyed me, servant. And that's specifically from the Bible. So that's what makes me believe that it is saying he is God. Or if they wanted to be less charitable, then it would be him pretending that he is righteous when he is not righteous. But this feels to me like it's trying to be a biblical story and give an idea of redemption. But then you look at everything that the ghost did, which includes letting that entire woman's family be murdered. So that he could have a redemption, because he knew that was going to happen. The ghost knew that all of this stuff inside of Canyon Diablo was happening, because he told Paul to go to Canyon Diablo. And then he also threw a letter at Paul to tell him what to do, whether it was to go to the telegram guy, because I still don't know if it was Paul that removed the telegram guy or if it was the ghost that removed the telegram guy.
I don't know.
Paul showed up at the cave, and it had to be because this guy
Bible man
about the cave.
So yeah, it does just fall flat on its face. It's definitely, again, ham-fisted bullshit. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm righteous. But I go back to that quote again: be careful what you do out in them streets for the public, because you are not of the Lord. Yeah,
that ends up being what it looks like. Is it's literally just him trying to show that he is
righteous.
He's
but
not
none of the way he does anything like that right there is a callback to Blood Meridian. If you look at any of the like Blood Meridian art, like that looks very Blood Meridian-esque, except it's not red, it's just blue. But which I'm not insulted. I don't want to sit here and knock George. I think George did a wonderful job. I just don't think he was given anything really of substance to work with. Just make it look cool and pretty, and then that's all you got to do.
Yeah, I think the writing is the bigger problem.
It's huge
some
problem.
of my final notes. I think, honestly, the level of art feels like it's wasted on the story, because the story wasn't fully realized.
No,
there are obviously so many different ways in which the story could have been taken and could have been developed, but I don't think that it got to its highest potential. And it was ultimately harmed because it tried to focus both on Bible Man and Paul. But Bible Man was more of the main character, while he was actually passive. Well,
I don't even know who the fuck the main character was. Actually, it's like, was it? Because it's like literally, it's going around like a bad like a bad middle of the road movie that you probably found on Amazon or something like that. That's what it reminds me of. And it's like, oh, here we are. Like, look, there's Redstone, who turns out to be Paul. And the reason why we, like the whole Paul thing became obvious to us is whenever you'd mentioned it at the beginning, but like whenever he says, my name is Paul, because people were calling him Righty. But that's how little significance this character even has to, is supposed to be his story, but it doesn't feel like it's anybody's story. It's just a story. That's why it kind of registers more like a really badly put together fable where, like, you don't really sympathize with Hansel or Gretel. There's just figments to make a point. Like it's a cautionary tale type of thing. That's what it feels like to me. And there's no real character in this other than its vagaries. And then the characters you do get any kind of characterization from are the bad guys, like Blackfeather, and then Big Daddy Lucifer Blackheart, Canyon Diablo. Which could it be more obvious and on the nose? And again, it's like, but whenever he says, my name is Paul, or the name is Paul, or whatever, I'm like, oh my God, are we really doing a retelling of Saul to Paul here? Like that's such basic Sunday school storytelling right there. And again, I can't stand it whenever I see people take the Bible and do that with this, because to me, it's not, it's like, it's to make up for something that is lacking in anything that is actually very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't play at the legend or the myth of this guy at all. Like, it would be really cool if this character was just so in the background, even kind of have him like in the background randomly, but Redstone doesn't notice him. But later when you go through the passages and you can look at it as like a viewer or reader, you're like, hey, look, there he is over there. There he is over there. Just have him be there the entire time without him even doing anything, just standing there, and he's with Paul the whole time, kind of guiding him in ways that Paul might not even realize, because again, the hand of God is so much more subtle than whatever this was. And I feel, as a Christian, I'm very insulted by this. Like I am so sick and tired of people doing this to God. I mean, granted, it's not going to affect God in any way. He's this moral arbiter of this universe. But to me, it's like, this is why people get away from the church, because of this type of stuff. You're beating them over the head with it. And you can sit there and say to the cows come home that it wasn't your intention to be this way, or that you aren't trying to be a Bible thumper. This is just specific to the character, when there are very obvious on the nose biblical references that aren't even really references, in my opinion. Like, cut off your right hand if it causes you to sin. There's that. And then you have like, him, like, I will make you rule over many, alluding the fact that this thing right here is God, or in some way supposed to be a part of him. It bothers me. I'm sorry, but that is so pretentious. Who do you think you are? Have some tact and read a book, and stop with this vagaries, because your vagaries are not smart. Okay? Like, I'm sorry, this is just something that makes me really mad. I've seen it in so much of the church. The church really would benefit from having good art. I feel like there's more artistic and direction in a movie like The First Omen that would make me go to the church than there is in this. And there's a demon hand that comes out of a vagina in The First Omen that you see on screen. Oh my God, like, excuse me. I'm going on a rant. It makes me mad. I just feel very offended, because this feels blasphemous. This feels blasphemous. I don't like that at all.
I can say that I do appreciate that. It feels like RazörFist seems like he put the skills that he did have to this. It just feels
That's
like
true.
that they underdeveloped skills. And I can understand how difficult it is to get so, like, feels like the author actually cared about this, as opposed to like with Isom, it didn't feel like the author really cared about it. Or
which is unfortunate.
Like with Gretchen's book, it didn't feel like the author really cared about it. It felt like it was relying specifically on references to other people's works that already
Yeah.
had names, and then
the body snatchers thing, it really bothered me. And for those of, this is gonna be very quick, I am the titular Stephen King fan that she consulted about Gretchen's book. So if y'all ever wanted to know who it was me. But I can't stand it when people do stuff like that. And yeah, it's true. You know, I can sit here and admire him for what he did. And I don't want to sit here and be totally unfair to this man. I don't even know him. I just know he's a political opiner. But it does feel like he did try with what he had available to him in terms of his skill level. And that is true. And I really do appreciate that he went and paid and hired an actual artist instead of cheating and using like AI or 3D assets, which I'm not so opposed to 3D assets, because I think if you're in a rush and you need something real quick, that's not going to be a problem. As long as you know how to incorporate it into the background, it's whatever, and give it some life. But I do appreciate that. It does feel like this did have a lot of work put onto it. I just think that he would need more experience, read some more, study some more, which is what we all have to do. And I don't want to be super harsh on him like I was early. It's just from experience, from what I've seen as a Christian, as somebody who's seen this a lot, I get tired of people beating me over the head with this stuff. And I can tell you from firsthand, it does not have the effect that you want it to have on people. If you are attempting to try and witness, which is what a lot of Christian authors do whenever they write, they attempt to witness. But then again, this doesn't really feel like it's attempting to witness to anybody. I think it's just trying to make a cool character, but it kind of felt it did not work.
Yeah, and for how many people I've seen pushing around the Iron Age label or the Comicsgate label, and they're people who never had an interest in writing or the arts period until like 1 or 2 years ago, when they felt like they could start grifting through it and do a cash grab because, oh, I think I can get money on this. And then they throw out stuff that doesn't have any formatting, that has writing like it was done by a third grader, because they just think that they can jump on it. This doesn't feel like the case for this author. This author feels like they have tried before to be writing, but they need to get some writing cohorts that they can trust, because all of my writing partners, they may not have always given me feedback that I have implemented, but every time I've gotten feedback from somebody, my writing has been made better. And it's helped me look for what to look for in other people's books, and analyzing other people's books has also made my writing better. And I understand that it is very difficult to find good critique partners, especially when you are a public face, because now people either want to kiss your ass, kiss your butt, or you're going to be like, are they being insincere in this? But actually learning which feedback is helpful and which isn't, and finding those good creative partners that are going to challenge you and discuss your fiction will always make you a better person. It's just difficult to get there. And I see, obviously I see good elements in this.
Oh yeah, there's a story here
that I wish that it had gotten pushed to the level to. I just don't think that it made it there.
I don't know what feedback he got. I don't know who he had in his ear telling him to do so. There might be a whole other story that did not get published because of bad feedback. I don't know. But I do feel like this guy actually cares. I just get very tired of things turning into movements.
Yeah.
You know, when art gets turned into movements, it's like, I just want somebody to tell me a story without there being some sort of an agenda attached to it, like alt media. Like, don't tell me that you are that. Just do, okay?
Just tell me the story.
Just tell me the story. I don't, you know, and people try to lump me in with this too, like ironage. I think is actually really fucking goofy, but everything has to be a movement now, whatever. You know, instead of just making art, you know, but when you get involved with movements like that and you start to label your stuff, that you're going to have to therefore fit the certain criteria and standards of that group. And I'm like, you can't keep me in a cage. Like, I'm going to write whatever I want to write. You can like it or you can not like it. We don't have to be in friends or anything like that. But like, I just don't like it when stuff gets labeled like that. And I feel like it does more harm than good, because I've seen people ignore what is very obviously badly written stuff that needs to be fixed because they don't want to step on somebody else's toes. And you're not doing them any favors with this.
And it needs to be made okay in a lot of these places to be able to receive feedback, to be able to receive criticism and not take it personally. And I've experienced that, not even being in any of these groups, but I've experienced too many authors that put stuff out there, even traditionally published authors, that start crap talking on their social media when they receive a critical review. You need to get over the fact of receiving critical feedback. It is not personal. It can be personal, but people can make anything personal if they want to.
Yeah, they can. Also, to notice when it is a personal thing, when it's actually about you, look at how they're writing the review, which is like they don't name anything specific about your book. They more so rely or refer to you rather than your book, or they're making up stuff that wasn't even in the book at all. That's a personal attack. That's somebody trying to ruin your business. But a negative review that's like, I just didn't really vibe with this. This is why I didn't like it. And they tell you why, this candid review. Like, that's not an attack on your business. And if you're going to be in this industry, then you need to stop with this and get a thicker skin.
And on the topic of if it wasn't in the book, keep in mind that there are variations of people identifying things in content and reading into situations or distrusting situations. So just because you read something in a book and somebody else reads something else in that same scene, it doesn't mean they're making it up, because you can interpret the same thing differently.
Right.
All it takes is for one reader to say, I believe this guy, and the other one to say, I don't believe this guy. And it changes everything in relation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a part of subjectivity in art. You know, it's like what you take away from it. Doesn't mean that means that anything can be art. It's just that what you take away from art. But the whole thing is like, I just feel like putting a name, like this kind of effort, you know, or excuse me, I'm trying to regather my thoughts. They're starting to speed really fast right now. But what I was going to say was, like, whenever movements get involved, you know, like you get Comicsgate, Gamergate, Pizzagate, like
Fandom Menace,
you know, the Culture Warriors. Oh my God. I've never seen so many people so out of touch, and I'm not just referring to what they're talking about in their videos, right? But just them not really trying to make an attempt to understand art outside of what they determine to be the right way to do something. And that's a lot of people. That isn't even just the griftosphere, Fandom Menace, whatever people. That's a lot of people and a lot of different groups. And that's why I just don't like groups that have like some sort of name attached to them, like, you know, ironage, ironage, whatever.
I mean, like, that even goes to, if you take it away from these people, that goes to a post that you saw forever ago, like weeks ago, that was going on. How could Dan Simmons write a racist like Melanie Fuller without being one? Well, maybe Dan Simmons understands writing a character.
Yeah, that bothered me so much. I was like looking up if anybody, because nobody talks about Dan Simmons, and that really makes me sad. Dan Simmons is a master. He is a master writer. He's a master at the craft. I'm a big fan of Stephen King, but I personally think that Dan Simmons writes better than Stephen King. And that's saying something, considering I'm a huge Stephen King simp. All right. But I love Dan Simmons' work. I love Hyperion. I love The Terror, Abominable. I love, you know, Carrie and Comfort is my favorite book that he ever wrote. Summer of Night, you know, I think it's like Summer of Night. Yep, it's up there on my bookshelf. Summer of Night. That's an excellent book too. Dan Simmons is a writer, and I've heard people make these really stupid claims about, since he wrote, if anybody's read Carrie and Comfort, there's a perspective in the book from one of the villains, Melanie Fuller. And this woman is a narcissist, but she's also a psychic vampire, and she's a much older than she would let you believe, even if she looks old and decrepit regardless. But she came from the antebellum South. Of course she would be racist. It doesn't take a genius to put two and two together. And it doesn't mean that Dan Simmons is a bigot because he knows how to use his imagination. It's like, I think, because the person made this really dumb comment about like, oh, well, I think that if you can write a character so sadistic like that, then that must mean that you have some sort of natural proclivity to it. I'm like, what? Like that, oh my God, dude. I remember I was like, everyone's asleep right now, and I'm the only one awake. I have to sleep with this tonight until somebody gets up in the morning so I can talk about it. I was so mad. I was like, that is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard in my life. Just because there's certain things in a story does not mean that that is the author believes in. It's a character. Are we not allowed to write that anymore? Because suddenly we're just going to be racists and wokies and whatever else we get called left and right to this day at this point.
It just becomes one of the difficulties that comes with media analysis.
Yeah, it does.
Yes, everything that you create as an artist will have a piece of you in it. It'll have your experiences. It'll have your disposition. If you're hopeful, if you're nihilistic, like those things that your family preferences, like those things will show through. But it's not so one for one as like this is in it, so then you are this thing. Because there's also amounts of creativity, but then you also have some people who are more creative, who do more things outside of their box, and other people who write things that are more specifically wish fulfillment or self-inserts or things that are specific to expressing what is very personal to you. I remember going to school in the MFA when a bunch of people, quite a few peers, were writing basically therapy fiction.
Oh, because of Donald Trump. I'm sorry.
It was for a couple of different reasons. They were just different levels of emotion. So sometimes you're going to have more straightforward things from the creator. Sometimes you're going to have more exploration. But that's what also gets really hard with media analysis, because it doesn't matter where you come from dispositionally. You might see things in the fiction and be like, well, why is this in here? And then you have to question. And sometimes you'll say, I wonder if it comes from the author, or if I wonder if this is an exploration of something in this text.
And also,
like, I have to question. I'm half joking with my tongue in my cheek when I go, why does Grady Hendrix always have women and piss in his books? But when there's a consistency,
oh my God,
I start asking questions. I'm not going to make any claims about anybody, but I have to ask questions of why is it always piss and women in his books?
Yeah, and Gretchen showed the same thing with that book that that came out recently, The Cuckoo. I was very insulted as a Stephen King fan. But speaking of Stephen King, like Holly, his most recent book, the newest one is like You Like It Darker, which is a collection of short stories. I don't have it yet, but I want it really badly. The Holly book, I was very disappointed to know that like 50 pages of that book were dedicated to shitting on anti-vaxxers and COVID deniers. But then also the real villains of the story were like these very these serial killer-esque, like uptight, snobby literary types that you see in colleges that will just demean you if you love fiction, because Stephen King does not like the literary types to talk about the literary devices. Like, you didn't use any of these themes in your book. The people that don't talk about a story but will tell you their themes in their story. That's the type of people Stephen King rags on. And so I can kind of appreciate the duality in that, where he's like, screw you, COVID deniers and anti-vaxxers, and screw you, literary professors.
That's part of the fun and learning stuff about creators, to like find where their intent is, or like what's a personal thing. Because again, not everything is personal. And that's part of the fun of finding the author's intent. But it's also part of the risks you take when you are a creative or creative person, because you're going to put stuff out there that people misinterpret. I've had some people think that Joey's opinions in Baltimore are my opinions of Baltimore. Or
it's your ACAB.
It's your ACAB too. But they didn't finish reading it. They read the first one and were like, but it just happens. And it's part of the fun and part of the scare, but it just happens. Anyway, getting back to something on this.
Excuse me. Yeah.
One of the other things that contributed it to feeling like it was trying to be Western-like, but not a Western. I mean, there was the Bible Man, which was a direct parable. But there was also the awkward language choices, like owner and proprietor, stuff like, quote, some as choose death, or, quote, I have heard tell of your exploits.
Let me get my,
and it felt like it was going for a vibe, but it really didn't make grammatical sense.
Allow me to find some Western dialogue from you, from the king of Westerns, Lonesome Dove by the legend himself, Larry McMurtry. This is a first edition copy If I could get the signed one, which is like $500 at my local bookstore, I'd get it because I love this book. Also, subsequently, this is the book that I'm named after. But it's like, read some stuff, right? You know, you can see here, like when Augustus came out on the porch, the blue pigs were eating a rattlesnake, not a very big one. It had probably just been crawling around looking for shade when it ran into the pigs. They were having a fine tug of war with it, and its rattling days were over. The sow had it by the neck, and the shout had it by the tail. You pigs, get, Augustus said, kicking the shout. Head on down to the creek if you want to eat the snake. See, like that's normal. People talked normally back then. Like I know that this book came out in the 80s, but like Larry McMurtry did his research. Like if you look into these things and you read literature that time, like especially like from Louis L'Amour, I think it was either Zane Grey. I actually think it was Zane Grey instead of Louis L'Amour. But Zane Grey existed during that time period. And so when you read the way that he wrote, like nobody talked like that. That's just exactly what you said. It's like, let me sound like I'm from a different time period.
And so there was one conversation that we had that was talking about another way that this could have happened. I know that we already said a few different ways as we were talking through the story, but I did save these from our conversation, which was that Redstone wakes up with the letter and the girl is there. And the letter says that he needs to take responsibility for the girl because he killed her family. And so then he needs to take that girl to the town. And should he want a second chance, then he'll find what he needs through this journey. And then he gets to the town to drop the girl off. He gets to stay there. And this is at the Canyon Diablo. And as he's staying there, he starts to see the corruption that's in that town. And he even possibly gets hired or attempted hired by the mayor to do some corrupt business because he looks like one of those guys. And this gives Paul an actual choice, a chance to make the decision to go into that lifestyle again and betray this little girl that he just bonded with and the family that he bonded with, or to do the right thing. And you could actually do a red herring where he accepts the contract from the mayor to use to then turn on the mayor later to protect the family. Get more
information to see what's going on. Like, oh, let me think about it. You know, build into the suspense. Like, there's some shady stuff going on in this town. Like I said, I told you earlier, like, I think it would have been cool if he had, like, lost his arm, right? But he was not chewed up like he was by all those bullets, because there's just no way he would have been able to, even if he did manage to survive, he would be out of commission for weeks to months. You know, plus he lost his arm. That takes forever to heal too. So, anyway, you could have just shown him like with his arm, you know, he's with the family. He somehow passes out after he is shot. He gets bit by a rattlesnake. Let's say he gets bit by a rattlesnake. And then he and the girl end up at that house that the mayor wants to commandeer and take from the people who live there. And he doesn't know how he got there until he gets the letter. And then the letter says, if you take care of this girl, then you will find the answers you need to know with the second chance or whatever. Something like that.
Imagine the mayor hired him to get the deed from the girl that lived at that house. And so then he starts spending time with that woman because he's fake romancing her.
You could fake romance her, make a friend out of her or something.
But then he actually bonds with her and cares about her and her family, and then finds out how twisted the mayor is, and that's where he makes the decision. But then that means the change at the end, wherever when he's telling that woman, you know, saying his goodbyes to the woman, actually makes more sense because they've actually got a relationship now.
They do have a relationship now, regardless of whatever that relationship would entail. Like, I'm not looking for romance. Maybe he becomes like a friend or something and whatnot. You could even go into that whole thing where he's talking about how the government's just trying to take everything. You could still have that conversation without Blackfeather, and then have Redstone, who maybe has been adverse to like society, right? You know, society at large, you know, civilized society, because they're all uppity and they make everything worse. They own a bunch of stuff, but then realize that not only are they not what he thought they were, and not all of them are the same, but they're kind of both in similar positions with people that are in power who just want to keep them under their thumb, because that's how it is for normal folk too, not just criminals. And there seems to be that disconnect. So they could even have a come together moment where it's like, we're not so different. I'm not so different from these people. They're just trying to live their lives and protect what they want, what's theirs. And there's all these people that are surrounding them that are supposed to be these really good, you know, in a suit, upstanding gentlemen of high society. And really, they're all a bunch of fucking reptiles that just want to devour everything and own everything and own you. And that's something that, you know, you could have him believe. Maybe he lost his ways. Like, I feel so dead inside now. I don't even know what I'm fighting for. And then finding this family again, you know, and you know, healing up with these people, he comes to care about them. Maybe, you know, maybe even he doesn't have to leave. He becomes like a ranch hand, sort of like how John Marston did in Red Dead Redemption 2 Epilogue. You know, and have him do all these things where it's like, give us a reason to like this man other than cool Western wannabe Clint Eastwood High Plains Drifter Phantom of the Opera. Like, that's what this is. And it, like, there's just a lot you could have done with it. There really is. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Westerns. Like I said, I'm like, man, I'm always down to see what anybody can do with a Western, but this is just not, it's not it, gang. It's not it.
Nope.
Not for me, at least. And it wasn't for Ian, but might be for you.
So the last thing is totally unrelated to this, but I thought I would throw it in here because it's relevant.
Yeah.
Especially because it's a comic review. And so then people who might have this question might also. And so the question that I was sent by the topic request form, which is in the comments down below, if you guys have a question that you would like addressed on the channel or a subject, submit it there. And eventually someday it'll be talked about. Yeah. So the question, I'm trying to catch up on them. The question was, I am an aspiring comic book artist and I'd like advice on how to convey information through dialogue and not to rush. So my first recommendation period for anyone all the time is go and read in the medium and genre in which you admire and find or like or want or are planning to write in, and find artists and writers in that genre that you like. And when you find them, identify what it is, like what you're trying to resolve. If it's looking at dialogue, go and look at the dialogue done by these writers that you really, really like and see what they did well and try to like backwards engineer it, reverse engineer it to see why it worked. Look at how they handled exposition. Look at how they handled providing information. Look at how they provided mystery, and can talk to yourself or write it down about why you think it worked or what it is that you liked about it. This is what we did in my master's program for most of our annotations is we read things, we saw something that we liked or didn't like, and then we reasoned with ourselves as to why we responded the way that we did. So my first recommendation is always read within the genre and medium that you like and find artists or writers that speak and create the way that you like to try to see how other people solve the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, because you know, that's what I do whenever I'm like stuck. I'm like, well, what would Dan Simmons do? How would Larry McMurtry handle this? How would Stephen King handle this? How would John Saul or John Irving handle this? Like any of the people that I really admire, or like Fannie Flagg, stuff like that, I would go and see what they did and then think, well, how can I, you know, what can I do to make that myself? Right. You know, like see how they did it without stealing from them, because ideas derive from the form of other ideas, and we do learn from other people. That doesn't mean that we're taking from them. You know what I mean? Because I know a lot of people are like, that's just stealing. I'm like, no, it's not. You're learning from them. That's why every writer ever, every author ever has always said, if you want to be a writer, you need to read a book. And you need to read a lot of them. And I do agree with you when you say, like, read from your the genre that you're wanting to write in. Absolutely. But I would also go out to say, if you want to be a writer in general, read other books from different genres, because it does give you a well-rounded scope of what you like. And it's actually not as like mind-boggling and, you know, cringy as you think it would be. It's actually really worthwhile. So I found a lot of books that are not, you know, spooky ooky wookies, you know, books, as I started reading more. But with dialogue, I would definitely be careful with that, because a lot of people tend to over embellish dialogue from what I've noticed. But sometimes what I've always heard is that usually kind of reminds me of Occam's razor a little bit, some sort of variation of it, where usually the simplest answer is the right one. Usually the simplest word that is the most recognizable is the right word to go with. You don't have to get super fancy with it. You can if you want. And like, advice is advice. You know, you don't have to take what I'm saying seriously. You don't have to take what she's saying seriously. You don't have to do this because process is process and everyone has their own process. But all I know from what I prefer is like, you can have a character say something meaningful without it sounding, without rating the thesaurus to make it sound super profound. It can rest on its laurels by what sort of message it's trying to convey, essentially what this character's trying to say.
I would
But
also
usually,
I would also say on that, think about the characters that you're trying to convey. Like,
yeah,
what are their personality types? Where are they coming from motivation wise? What
yeah,
information would they freely give? What information would they word vomit on? Because there are
right,
some stories, like with novels even, where these characters meet and this person just starts vomiting all of their
yeah,
backstory on this person they don't even know. And it's like, why would you do that? Would this
yeah.
character openly trust someone else that much?
Exactly. Because like, it's really just adhering to logic. Like you said, if the story adheres to the logic that it's presented you, internal logic, consistency with that. But then there's also like, it does depend on the character. Maybe some character might say proprietor, you know, just to use an example, based on that character's personality. But that's why we have to get to know these characters. And if this character consistently uses larger words, they have a very large vernacular, a very healthy fat vernacular, and they like to use it, you know, liberally, you know, then you can continue with that. That makes sense for that character to talk like that versus a character who wouldn't talk like that. But you don't have to have everyone talk the same. It just depends on, you know, the characters in which you've established for their characterization, I think, for dialogue. And um, but that's what I've noticed. Again, like, usually the simplest word is the right word to go with. But that doesn't mean that you have to do that regard. Do whatever you want, but
Also,
as long as you're having
an
fun.
important thing to realize is the difference between what you know the characters need to share in the story and what the characters think they need to share in the story. Because,
Yeah.
like, you as the author are going to have this top view because you know where you want to move the characters, whether you're drafting or you're revising or you're
Hmm.
editing, you know where they need to move. But is that the same circumstance for the character who is being asked that information? And while you want to, the
Yeah.
author, want to give the reader all of this information, would the character being asked the question also offer up all of that information? Or would that character, one, not offer up full information because they don't think all of it's important, or two, be hiding things? Because
Right.
there's a tendency in general for a lot of people that you fall on one spectrum or the other, where it's like you get asked one question and maybe you share your entire life story.
I tend to ramble. Like, I tend to bloat my work. I have a problem. Something that I have noticed, like what you're talking about, is like, I tend to, as the author, over explain through characters, like with Tack. I'm like, okay, I need to reel this back because I don't know if he would. I don't know if I'm being vague. I don't know, but that's why I'm going to give it to you at some point, so you can tell me what you think of that. But
That's what happened with Body Moors 2 and 3, I think it was, as some of my beta readers were like, I don't think this character would explain this much. And so then I
yeah,
had to start cutting stuff. And that can happen. It's like, think of the character, and you may not be able to catch it, which is another place where beta readers can help you, because they're going
yeah,
to, and trusted beta readers, because they're going to try to get to know your
yeah,
characters. And then they're going to try to help you clip your story to make those characters stronger. And so think about a lot of people when they're asked a question, they also won't offer more information than the bare minimums, because they
right,
either will not think about anything past it, or they just won't be somebody that willingly offers
right.
information for whatever reason.
But not only that too, but also like the trusted beta readers, because like, I know everybody thinks that like all criticism is good criticism. It's actually not. Because you can get very confused by the number of feedback you're getting. Because like you were telling me the other day, you said, I don't think the human brain was designed to be intercepting this many opinions all at once from different people, which I kind of agree with, because I'll start to feel overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I got to back out of here. But like, again, find somebody that you know who gets you, but is not afraid to be honest with you. And that can be really, really hard to find. I'm very lucky that I stumbled across Ian when I did. I can trust her wholeheartedly with whatever I'm doing and know that she'll be honest with me about stuff. But a lot of different feedback can confuse you because everyone has different readerly preferences. And so you have to figure out what kind of beta readers you're going to need to use, um, in order to get the most out of that experience, so to speak. That's what I think, at least. Like, too much feedback can be really bad. Like, too much of anything can be really bad.
Yeah.
The same as like not having enough can be is bad in general. Like, you got to find the balance. So.
Oh, also, I have a second thing on the dialogue. Number one, say the dialogue out loud to yourself to see how it flows going back and forth.
Yeah.
Number two, something that I personally absolutely hate when I'm reading a comic book or what is sold to me as a comic book is I turn the page and it's like a wall of text.
Oh,
or
God.
if it's like you got the word bubbles that take up a third or a half or more of the panels, and it's all words. And like sometimes it can work, but using it liberally, which I've seen the Rippaverse do, I've seen some of the ALA books do, like Genderqueer, and I popped open the Anne Frank graphic novel the other day, and it's got just like pages of almost all text where it's more like a journal than a graphic novel. And that's the same with Genderqueer. It's more freaking journal with an illustrated journal. But so think about if you're having to explain that much where half of your page is dialogue instead of visuals, then maybe you're not writing a comic book. Because for me, and it's totally my preference when it comes to comic books, because I'm pretty sure that there are plenty of popular comic books that do have that are wordier. But I prefer comic books that can also take breaks and tell stories just through the visuals.
The imagery. Yeah, just the imagery. I think that's one of the things I had an issue with Ghost of the Badlands. And this is not a knock on George. It really isn't. I think George is wonderful. We've said this, iterated this about a bunch of times, but George, like you're safe. Okay. I just feel like it was so empty. It was beautiful to look at, but there's no personality in it. It's just like, oh, look, the old Wild West.
All the personality was brought by George's art.
Yeah, it was like the expressions and stuff like that and whatnot, but there was no real sense of place. And that is another thing that I said 2 years ago or last year when we were talking about Guns and Smoke, is that every great Western ever has always had a wonderful and strong sense of place. You know where you are, you feel immersed in it. And I did not feel immersed in this. I felt like it was way too fast. It slowed down in all the wrong spots. It said all the wrong things. Like, I did not care about the whole black feather thing. It could have been better because it's just, again, I know it's supposed to be in the Badlands. I know it's supposed to be in Arizona before Arizona was a state, but I don't feel like I'm in Arizona. It didn't do anything to really encapsulate the personality or atmosphere or culture of Arizona during that time period. And that's an important part about any book, really. Like, look what you do with Baltimore and Bodymore. Like, my book is taking place in Miami Beach. I've been doing oodles of research about what I'm going to take from this to put in to add to the authenticity of Miami Beach, Florida. I'm not going to add in everything, but just the local politics of what's happening there, you know, the culture itself. Like, you have to immerse yourself into these places if you're using real world places. But I think what the problem is people think of it as like, well, it's already a real place that exists. I don't have to do that much world building. I feel like that's what people think. And then they do the opposite with fantasy, which is most of the time in a world that doesn't even exist. And then they over-explain all the wrong things. And it's just, again, it's like you need to, the environments are characters. Treat them like they're characters. That's another important part. That's how good visual storytelling works. So that's probably about what I have to say, unless you have anything else to add.
Nope, that'll be all for today. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Have you read Ghost of the Badlands? Will you read Ghost of the Badlands? Would you read more of Ghost of the Badlands to follow either Bibleman or Paul Redstone?
You know, it's going to be funny. I think I would actually read another one of these because I would actually want to see what's going to happen. But I had a great time. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad that I loved how we both read this at the same time. It was actually a lot easier than you'd have to wait for me to catch up.
And we will be doing more comic books reviews in the future. We have the next one or two kind of figured, but they come sporadically. So be prepared with those if you are interested in these. So that said, thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?